Greetings, true believers, and welcome to another edition of the Reality TV RHAPpy Hour. My name is Jordan Parhar, and this week, we've got something a little special for you. We're talking about American Idol. Yeah, that's right. That show is still on the air, and we're going to be talking about that this week on robasawebsite.com. Today, I'm joined by my good pal. You can also see him on Reality TV RHAP-ups, on the Top Chef podcast. You can see him on the Survivor Historians. You can see him on Rob as a podcast. He's all over the place. He's killing it. It's Mike, what's your rap name again? Is it MC Blue Mizzle? Is that what we settled on?
I mean, apparently the last time I was on the voicemails, I got like 30 different nicknames. So honestly, you pick one out of a hat and I'll assign it to myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's there. I heard, what was it, Mixmaster Mike? Was that
there
one?
There was Mixmaster Mike. Rob and I also chose Mingle Mixmaster Mike. So I'm preparing myself to become the man of 1,000 names by the time I progress through my time on RHAPpy.
Oh, Mingle Mixmaster Mike. I forgot about that one. Start wearing a banana suit, maybe.
Yes, talking about how people are wearing medium clothing.
All right. Mike Bloom is here with me once again. One of my favorite guests to have on the show. Mike, how are you doing this Saturday afternoon?
I'm great. I'm thrilled that you had me on. I will gladly be the Brian Dunkleman to your also Brian Dunkleman. So it's going to be... If you guys are expecting like Ryan Seacrest caliber podcasting here, I don't know, you might be sorely mistaken. This is not top 20 countdown.
No, it is not, unfortunately. Yeah, that's right. I mean, Brian Dunkleman's really here today with you. So for those of you tuning in and you're not sure, I mean, if you haven't watched American Idol, you might be a little bit lost here. But basically what Mike and I were talking about doing, and we figured, it's the off season, open to doing lots of different things on the podcast. And I wanted to do a podcast that wasn't going to be 5.5 hours or 3 hours long. So I came up with something. I thought, okay, well, what's going on right now? Well, American Idol, the final season is premiering. So I thought, well, I'm not really watching it anymore, but I figured it would be a good idea to maybe go back, reflect, and look at all of the different seasons, the singers, the judges, all that kind of stuff related to the show. Because at one point, Mike, American Idol was really the biggest show in America, and it was for quite some time.
Yep, I mean it's a cultural juggernaut. I think when we're going to look back on like the 2000 to 2010 years, American Idol has to be in the conversation, and you also have to look at like its impact on reality TV. It was really the first American reality show that invented this whole concept of a panel of judges and popular voting. We had The Real World, we had Survivor before that, but a little bit of Amazing Race, but no show before that had come to the U.S. and said, "You guys are the ones that are voting. You guys are the ones that are deciding to move on," and that has had a profound effect. We wouldn't have America's Got Talent. We wouldn't have X Factor. We wouldn't have The Voice. We wouldn't have Dancing with the Stars. We wouldn't have The Sing Off. We wouldn't have all these other singing shows that popped up once Idol became huge. This was really the trend starter. This set off the row of dominoes that really falls to this day.
It's really, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned all these shows. I mean, there was what was the show before? There was Star Search. Wasn't that a show before this?
Yes, Star Search had a singing section in it, and there were, but that was a judging panel. I guess the closest we got to audience voting was on America's Funniest Home Videos, when the people in the audience got to choose who won the $10,000. Oh,
if only Bob Saget was the host of American Idol, how different things could have been.
It would be clips of them singing, and Bob Saget would be like, "Oh, here I am. I'm singing Ticket Lately by Stevie Wonder. Here I
go." Oh man, Mike, I didn't realize you could do such a good Bob Saget.
I could do the one voice that Bob Saget does on America's Funniest Home Videos.
Oh my goodness. Oh, good old Bob Saget. Well, before we get into it, Mike, I just want to let everyone know we're live on Blab doing this. So if you've got any questions as we're going along, feel free to send them in. You can type in /Q in the comments. Don't know if we'll get to any video questions today, but if you do have a question, feel free to leave it, or a topic of discussion or something you want us to touch upon. Mike and I will certainly talk about it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through chronologically in order from season 1 to season 15 of American Idol, and we're going to talk about basically the show as a whole. This is essentially the American Idol historians, but instead of doing multiple 4-hour podcasts covering each season, we're just going to do one hopefully 2-hour-ish podcast talking about the entire series as a whole.
So does that mean I have to replace somebody, right? If I'm an American Idol historian, that's the only way I can be a podcast historian. I have to replace somebody.
Well, normally, I'm here. My unofficial co-host is Taryn Armstrong. Taryn's not here today. So, Mike, there you go. I guess you're the
everybody's. I wouldn't say favorite replacement. I would say available replacement. Mike Bloom is here. Yes.
and Ashley in the chat is saying Taryn was here. I thought, yeah, Taryn is here. But Taryn and I talked. Taryn said he kind of watched it a little bit as a wee lad, but I feel like Mike is the better American Idol historian. Sorry, Taryn, but Taryn and I will be back next week, and you can see you get Taryn all the time. So it's time for some Mike Bloom. This is going to be good. I'm excited. Don't forget to subscribe as well to Reality TV RHAPpups. Go to robhasawebsite.com/RHAPpups if you haven't already. You can get every single episode of the RHAPpy Hour. You can get Amy and Haley covering The Bachelor, Bachelorette, Brian and Allie doing The Challenge, Mike Bloom, Antonio Mazzaro, Kirk Clark doing Top Chef. Lots of great stuff. Definitely check that out. All right, enough preamble, Mike. Let's just hop right into it. Season 1 of American Idol starts. Now, is a young Mike Bloom watching this season? How did you hear about American Idol and how'd you get into it?
So American Idol was kind of like a Survivor. It was one of those shows where, and like a couple of other series today, where like a couple of episodes will air and then somebody will say like, oh, you should probably watch this show. And from what I remember, I believe American Idol functioned in a very similar mentality because, again, this is a show that we hadn't seen before in the U.S. So I was definitely watching it. The great thing about American Idol for me is that it combines sort of my love for singing with my love for competitive reality television. So that was like a perfect match in my book. And, I think I missed maybe the first couple of audition episodes, but from then on, I was pretty much hooked. And it was an interesting first season as well, because we didn't know the format ahead of time. So we were sort of, all taking that ride together as to how is this going to work? Is this going to be successful?
It really was. There was a lot of the Survivor comparison is really good because it's people were talking about, although from what I can recall, because I was this aired in 2002, right?
The summer of 2002. Yeah.
Yeah. So similar to Survivor, it's airing in the summer, and it's unknown if this thing is going to be a big deal. I actually didn't realize, and like with Survivor, for a lot of people, I didn't actually tune in until the finale week, because that was when the buzz was huge and there's all this crazy stuff going on. So for me, I missed a lot of this season, and unlike Survivor and Big Brother, I don't know about you, Mike, but I don't go back and rewatch American Idol seasons. So let's just set up what was the concept right off the get-go. They introduced Simon, Randy, and Paula. And then basically the format was the same. They go around to all these cities and then they have Hollywood Week. Am I correct with that?
Yep, that's exactly. And it's, they obviously from like season 2 onwards, they stretch out these stages of the competition. But here it was much more truncated. It was a couple weeks of auditions and some highlights and some lowlights, about a week of Hollywood rounds, which involved solo singing and group rounds. They did, I believe, 4 weeks of semifinals where it was 3 groups of people and they picked 3 competitors from each. America voted 3 competitors through on each one. Then they had a wild card. And then right from there, they had live shows. They had, 10 down to 8, and then they just kept summarily eliminating people. So it was pretty straightforward going through. So you hopped in during the finale. Did you have any idea what was going on? Had you heard about like Kelly Clarkson and Justin Guarini beforehand, or did you just watch it blind and figure out who were these contestants?
No, yeah, I went in completely blind, and I guess 2002 summer, I would have just turned 9, I guess. So I would have been in like grade 3. And my aunt actually had recently moved to California. So American Idol was huge and everybody was talking about it. And in Canada, I don't think it had really exploded as much. And my mom had heard from my aunt. My aunt said, hey, you got to watch this show. You got to check it out. Watch the finale. So my mom sat us all down one night and said, guys, we're all going to watch this show. And so I was like, all right. Like I just watched whatever my parents watched. And I saw Guarini with the long hair and Kelly Clarkson. And I thought, wow, this is like a really big spectacle, maybe as Abby Maria would say. And I was just enthralled. And then sure enough, season 2 came around and I was hooked really from that finale. But yeah, I really, for the most part, I missed most of the big name contestants. And for each season, Mike, I just want to go through quickly.
Big name contestants, yeah.
Yes, a big name for those seasons. Memorable contestants, I guess. And some of these people ended up being big names, I guess we can say, in the music industry. For the most part, not so real and so much. But first, the judges. Okay, because there might be a handful of people who are like just the most diehard of Happy Hour listeners who did not watch American Idol or for whatever reasons. Maybe we've got some younger listeners who weren't around when this format was intact. So let's just talk about the judges a little bit. So Simon Cowell comes onto the scene right away. And explain Simon to the audience for people who don't know Simon. I feel like most people probably will know who Simon Cowell is, though.
Yeah, I mean, they probably know him nowadays because of his involvement in the reality TV community. I think before that, though, I mean, he was involved with Britain's Got Talent, which was sort of the big British show that really, I guess, started the international phenomenon of singing competitions. But previously to that, I mean, he's a record producer. And that's sort of, I mean, if you look at our judging panel here, you have him, who is pretty much an unknown to Americans, obviously. Randy Jackson, if you maybe were really in the music industry, you know him. He played bass with Boston, and he worked with, the Jacksons. So he sort of has his hands in a lot of different musical pots. And then Paula Abdul, people knew her, but people knew her 20 years ago when she was dancing with MC Scat Cat. So it was kind of weird to see her sort of come back to the forum. So that was probably risk number one, was bringing in this panel of judges that I would say, nowadays they wouldn't try to attempt bringing in unknowns to a judging panel.
Oh, definitely not. But at the time, such a new concept, they've probably figured, well, I mean, let's actually get real professionals in this kind of in as the judges, because they'll know what's up. And sure enough, I mean, the chemistry between these three was really, I mean, ever since it all dissipated and they went off and did their own thing. I mean, nothing has been, in my opinion, in terms of judging panels, I don't think I've ever seen one that has had as good of chemistry as those three together in their heyday. Would you agree with that, Mike?
I mean, I would say that I actually really like this modern set of judges with J-Lo and Keith Urban and Harry Connick Jr. I think they have a really good chemistry together, and they all have really great musical sensibilities about them. I mean, we can probably talk about the stages of judges later on, but I think some of the problems you get with those judges in the middle stages is that not a lot of them are great musical judges. You want to have the person that comes in and says, you were having tonal difficulties. You're saying, you made these interesting modular shifts with songs. And I feel like the panel nowadays can do that. We'll talk about the modern format of American Idol later, but I feel like they're sort of shifting to an idea, similar sensibility as The Voice, in terms of the judges are fun, let's shift to the judges. Whereas an American Idol in its heyday, even though that panel had great chemistry, like you just brought up, Jordan, they would not spend so much focus on it like they do now.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there were some parody things with Simon and Paula. They didn't like the finales and stuff and stupid skits like that. But for the most part, nothing like it is with The Voice now and those kinds of shows. But, oh my God, just bringing back so many memories thinking of those guys. You saying the pitch thing, I just think of Randy Jackson being like, "Yo, it was pitchy, dog. It was pitchy,
dog." Yeah, Randy Jackson, he grew very old on the show because he had these phrases. He had you had the pitchy dog, you had the yo, you're in it to win it, dog. It was, especially when we get into seasons 10 through 12, he just kept repeating himself. You could have put literally a broken record in his seat and it would have done just a good job as judging as Randy Jackson did. Yeah, you can sing the phone book in the chat. That was another big one too. When you work on a show for 12 years, you're bound to have some catchphrases, which I think is a sign that he got a little long in the tooth with sticking on Idol for so long.
Yo, I'll give you props, Mike, for that point. I'll give you props, dog.
Hey, Blab loves the props, so.
That's right, Blab does love. Maybe Randy Jackson has a stake in Blab.
I wouldn't be surprised.
CEO of Blab, Randy Jackson. That would... Okay. Basically, you're going to Hollywood? Was that catchphrase also you're going to Hollywood? Was that a big thing as well in the first season, or did that phrase not exist until a little bit later on?
I mean, I think it sort of gained popularity later on, sort of like how usually nowadays with the auditions, it's a majority rules. They go down the line and each judge says yes or no. That didn't used to be a thing until maybe season 2 or 3, I want to say. So you can see the judges even starting to figure it out as they went along, their judging process. But yeah, I think they might have had You're Going to Hollywood to start off, but sort of like The Tribe Has Spoken, it became like a big cultural totem because Idol became such a big thing.
Absolutely. Now, major people on this season, Mike, just from looking at it, at least at least from Wikipedia, obviously we have Kelly Clarkson. Kelly Clarkson is arguably the most successful Idol alum from this show. I mean, was it obvious from the beginning that Kelly was going to win this thing?
No. There was a point in around the middle of the season. I think it might not have been the specific performance, but I know she did a song called Stuff Like That there one night, and that was when everyone's eyes sort of opened. Or maybe it was when she performed You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, but that was one of those two performances was when America thought like, oh, who's this like nice little waitress? Because she had pretty much been like an under the radar, if using Survivor terms, type of person. Justin Guarini actually seemed like a pretty big favorite. You know, he was an attractive male, he had a good voice, but Clarkson kind of swept, got everyone up in a fervor and kind of swept the game out from Guarini's feet.
And that was the next person I wanted to talk about, was Justin Guarini. And so, because from my perspective at the time, even as a little young boy, I thought, wow, this is a guy who like all of the girls everywhere must really love this guy because he's got the hair and all this kind of stuff. But you're saying he actually was a talented singer.
He was a pretty talented singer. I will say that the crop of contestants in season 1, with Kelly Clarkson being the exception, are not great. When you have an unknown reality show, you're probably, specifically when you're casting for talent, you're probably not going to get the best of the best. I would argue that there was much more better talent that came on in later seasons. But I thought Justin Guarini had like a pretty nice voice. I think some of the other people that made the top 10 were a lot worse than Justin Guarini. I don't know if he deserved a spot in the top 2. He also had this really interesting moment, which is so weird how meta it got early on in the season, where like I think Simon Cowell said something negative to Justin Guarini, and Justin asked the audience like, yeah, well, what do you guys think? And they all cheered. And so it was almost seen as like insubordination, and he ended up in the bottom 2 the next night because
wow,
I think people took it as like a very cocky statement, and it was. So it was interesting to kind of track his progress throughout.
Okay, a couple others I had on my list. Tamira Gray. She was somebody who, from what I'm reading, people thought she was a big favorite on the show, yep. But she was ousted, I believe, at 3 or 4.
4. The big deal was that Nikki McKibben, who Rob said he knew, and I don't know whether to be jealous or pity him. She kind of snuck her way into the top 3, and she was probably the first big shock boot of the franchise. Of course, we'll see more coming up throughout the seasons, but people were pretty shocked because I would say Tamira and Justin Guarini were 2 big frontrunners for a good majority of the competition.
And Tamira was somebody who came back a lot of these people came back to perform on these shows, but Tamira Gray, even on, I think season 3, the finale, she sang the Star Spangled Banner to start the show, that kind of stuff. So yeah, really, it seemed like the producers were really behind her. And Nikki McKibben, yeah, fun fact, she was on Celebrity Rehab. That was actually how I knew of her, because I didn't watch American Idol, but I did watch Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. So yeah, I don't know. Rob, if you're still in the chat, if you want to say if you are lucky to know her or you're not. Oh, Rob says she's crazy. So
and obvious statement is obvious, yeah. Pink hair is sort of an external signal that something might not be clicking up there.
All right. So controversy throughout the season, there was a few things, and I made some notes for every season because it seems like on every season, Mike, of American Idol, there was some sort of controversy or random things of note that were worth bringing up. So the major thing, there's 2 major things that I really want to talk about. One is Brian Dunkleman, and you mentioned Brian Dunkleman at the start of this podcast. Explain to the audience who Brian Dunkleman is, because a lot of people do not know who Brian Dunkleman is, but they probably should. And if something else would have gone a little bit differently, who knows what would have happened to Brian Dunkleman?
Yeah, I would equate Brian Dunkleman's situation to your friend who gets a bad stock tip and sells all his shares of a stock before it skyrockets. Brian Dunkleman was a comedian, I believe, who they decided in the first season, let's have Seacrest and Dunkleman do a dual hosting thing. And from what I remember, it was fine. I don't know. Now watching Seacrest do it on his own, I don't know if there needed to be two hosts, but I feel like they had good rapport together. But after the first season, I think Dunkleman thought like, well, this reality TV thing, I don't want to work on this. Let me pursue a career in comedy. And that turned out to be a big mistake since Ryan Seacrest has now basically taken over the world in properties.
Yeah, I feel really sorry for him because he was a guy. I mean, what would have happened if he would have stayed, Mike? Hypothetically, American Idol was the number one show on television really throughout from 2000 to 2010. It was in the discussion of being the number one show. What would have happened to Brian Dunkleman? Do you think they would have kept him on the show, or do you think that eventually they would have just pushed him to the side and he would have ended up in this anyway?
No, I don't think they had a problem with him. It's not like they were saying like, "Oh, good riddance, let's get rid of him." I think had he stayed on, maybe him and Ryan would have like split hosting duties. They would have done different segments or something. But now looking back on it, I really can't see it working with two hosts now. I mean, Seacrest is he's almost machinal in his ability to do a lot of different things. But I feel like he runs such a tight ship that I can't imagine adding someone else onto that.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know if Seacrest himself would have become as huge if he didn't have the entire spotlight just to himself. Yeah. But yeah, I just quickly looked up Brian Dunkleman on Twitter. He's at Brian Dunkleman. Mike, does he have fewer followers than I do, or do you think he has more followers than I do?
I think he has more.
Brian Dunkleman on Twitter has 3,083 followers.
Oh,
and that is the biggest travesty that people do. Brian Dunkleman, it's Brian Dunkleman. He's a big part of reality television history. And a schmuck like myself has more followers than him. Please go follow Brian Dunkleman and help him out and we should maybe start like maybe a change.org thing or like a Kickstarter campaign to like help resurrect his career, because really I feel terrible for this man.
Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, he could definitely jumpstart his own career. I mean, this is Idol's final season. I'm sure he could live tweet it. I wouldn't be surprised actually if Idol brought him back to do a sort of bit because he was such a part of their history.
I hope they do, because he really deserves that. I mean, he got screwed so bad. So, although it is his own fault,
it's by his own action. So, but yeah. I mean, I don't. I mean, it was probably more of a career decision in hindsight, but it ended up paying off horribly for him because Seacrest was able to sort of parlay this reality TV hosting job into like producer, radio host, TV host. So, I think he missed the train on that one.
Taryn Armstrong says, is the Dunkleman mistake bigger than Parhar's self-nomination? Twitter has decided yes. And Ike Moore is saying hashtag Dunkleman lives matter. So yeah, maybe that's the campaign that will start, Mike.
Maybe not that one. I don't know. I want to make association with other hashtags. I'm equating racial attempt for racial harmonies with getting Brian Dunkleman back on TV.
Oh, okay. Season 1. Okay, so that's basically season 1. Oh no, wait, sorry. There was one other thing from season 1. Very big thing from season 1 as well. So we talked about one horrific decision. Mike, now I want you to tell me if this is a worse decision. So 20th Century Fox, after the season happened, they said, okay, we've got a hit on our hands. We had 22 million viewers for the finale. This is great. Kelly Clarkson is blowing up. Justin Guarini is super popular. Why not make a movie with these two people who have never acted ever in their lives before as the main stars? And we'll call it From Justin to Kelly. And it'll be the next Sound of Music. It'll be a great musical and everyone will love it. And Mike, what was the reaction to that?
Not so much love. A lot more vitriol than love. I mean, I would call it the equivalent of like when they decided to say like, oh, let's have the Olsen twins make a CD. You know, you can't lift people from one genre and then automatically put them in another and then make assumptions that they're gonna do well in it. Now, Justin Guarini and Kelly Clarkson are not actors, so when you put them in leading movie roles, they're not going to do well. Though I know you and I have been talking on Twitter, there might be the possibility of a summer movie cast about From Justin to Kelly, because it is fantastically horrendous in all the best ways.
Yeah, on Wikipedia it says that it's listed under the worst films of all time, and there's a list of a ton of movies, and From Justin to Kelly is in that list. So quite the honor it has received. And Mike, as long as you're up for it in the offseason, maybe after the finale of American Idol, we can do the From Justin to Kelly movie cast.
Yeah, on one side it might be honoring the timeliness of the series that was American Idol. On the other hand, it might be cleansing the palate from a horrible winner of American Idol. Either way, we win.
It's a win-win. Rob Cesternino in the chat says, "Get Cochran." I think Cochran's harder to get a hold of these days than Eric Stein, Mike,
or Brian Dunkleman. We'll get a 4-way podcast. You, me, Dunkleman, and Cochran. It's happening now. I want that change.org petition going on.
Okay, I actually think, Mike, we could, if we like rallied the troops, we could potentially get Brian Dunkleman, right? Because what else is he doing?
I have no idea. Let's send out the call, the bat signal, guys. Let's make this happen. I'm down.
All right. Let's okay. Let's do that. I'll work on it. I'll figure out my plan of attack on how to recruit Brian Dunkleman. But I honestly think, I mean, I'm joking, but at the same time, I'm like kind of serious. I think we could get him, which is amazing. You can
bully him with your Twitter followers.
Yes, that's right. I have more Twitter followers than you. Come on. No, I'm not. Don't want to pull a Frankie Grande. That's the worst thing to do, especially when you're maybe if I had like 100 times the amount of followers that I have, but no, when you're a small time reality TV RHAP-ups podcaster, I don't really think you can get away with that kind of thing. Okay, season 2, Mike. So now American Idol has blown up. It had a big finale. A lot of people, it built a lot of momentum throughout the season. A lot of people are really checking this show out. So now the modern style of auditions are happening. It's really stretched out. There's a lot of people that are hearing about it. A lot more people are applying to be on the show, so the field is a lot better. So we actually have some really strong contestants this season. We have Ruben Studdard, who is your winner. What were your thoughts on Ruben, Mike? Or maybe not just Ruben, but Ruben versus Clay, because that was a very interesting dynamic and battle that we saw throughout the season.
And I think people have said to this day that this is probably one of the most closely heated competitions in the entire franchise. And I would agree. I forget what the difference is in percentage between the two of them with the final votes, but it was extremely close. I think I remember at the time probably being a bigger Ruben fan than a Clay fan, because I actually sort of agreed with, throughout the competition, Simon had these remarks that Clay Aiken was very theatrical. That he almost seemed like he was, Simon used the terms like cruise ship, and that he almost seemed like he was more destined for a Broadway show than he was for a stadium. And I definitely felt that, and he definitely had some slip-ups, whereas like Ruben seemed pretty steady throughout. Granted, he was pretty one note. He could only do R&B, but I thought he was like pretty good throughout. I think the person that I probably liked the most was actually Kimberly Locke, who was the third place finalist. I thought she was really, really great artist. But that being said, I still love the Clay and Ruben showdown. And I've grown to love Clay Aiken now throughout his appearances on Celebrity Apprentice and his attempted run for Congress. I think...
Wait, Clay Aiken ran for Congress?
Yep, he lost in the general election. I guess if I can make a comparison for you genius watchers out there, Clay Aiken is the Jinho of America. In terms of everything he tries to do, he always gets second or never wins.
Oh man, poor Clay Aiken. How that's celebrity. Donald Trump doesn't take him. America doesn't take him. People voting for Congress don't take him. I was also on the Ruben, as a big Ruben fan as a kid, and I don't know if it was because he always had the 205 shirt. I really liked that. Or maybe it was, I really loved how Seacrest would always like throw Ruben the towel because he was so sweaty after every performance. I just thought that was so great. It was amazing listening to Ruben sing. But the number, I did look it up for you. You were saying it was really close. So what happened was there was some controversy over this. So Ruben beat Clay by 134,000 votes. That is by far the smallest margin of votes in the history of the show. I mean, we've had seasons where, because if you think about how many people voted, I mean, there are millions upon millions of votes for these things. But there was some controversy right off the bat because apparently at the finale, Seacrest said the difference in votes was 13,000. And then later he corrected. Then he said it was only 1,335 votes. So
wow.
I don't know what Seacrest was doing there. Maybe if he had Dunkleman helping him out, he could have corrected that.
Dunkleman
error.
was the numbers guy. Yeah,
exactly. Other than those guys, you talked about Kimberly Locke. She was somebody who she placed in third, was very popular that season. A couple other memorable people for me as a kid watching the show, two people, and maybe this was just because I was interested in them because of their legal troubles. The first was Trinice, who Mike, do you remember Trinice's real name?
I don't remember, but she had an arrest record, right? Did she have like a DUI or something?
I think she had a DUI, and then also she was caught shoplifting or something. And there was, I don't know if it probably wasn't Fox, but it was some other like news station. It was like they were reporting it was like, oh, breaking news, American Idol contestant has a criminal record. And there was like a surveillance camera of her in some convenience store stealing something. I'm not quite sure what the situation was, but her name actually, her given birth name, Mike, was LaShundra Cobbins. That was her real name.
Well, she shunned Lysandra and became Trinice. So I guess good for her, though. I guess that allowed her to. It's interesting because, there have been a couple contestants, including one on this season, who got disqualified for their prior criminal records. And it's interesting that if they dug up this dirt on Trinice, they still kept her in the competition.
Well, I think the deal with Trinice was that Trinice was up front from the beginning. So that was why they decided to let it go. Also, random side note, I used to get so annoyed watching it when Trinice would sing and she would like tap her microphone like as the beat would go. And a lot of people would do that, but I don't know, maybe Trinice just had a really long index finger. And as a kid, I was always just like, why is she going like this? I just, that's so unnecessary. And yeah, so I was not a big Trinice fan, especially at the time hearing the name LaShundra Cobbins. As a 10-year-old, I found that I found that quite funny because I'd never heard that name before. But yeah, there you go. LaShundra Cobbins, Trinice, another interesting person on the show. The other person who had a criminal issue or legal issues, I should say, was Corey Clark. Now, Mike, do you remember the big situation with Corey? I'm sure most people do.
There were several situations, and I should say sticky situations. Corey Clark was, I believe, so he got disqualified in season 2 for, I think, not disclosing prior legal troubles. And then when I think it was like 2008, maybe it was like during season 8 or 9, he came forward. He was a whistleblower apparently, and said that he had a relationship of the sexual variety with Paula Abdul, and that helped him along a little bit in the competition.
Yeah, that is one of the most fascinating things that I remember from the entire series was just watching that. It was on ABC Primetime, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and he wrote a book about it and there was all this stuff. And at first I didn't believe it, but then watching it, I was kind of convinced that it happened, and seeing Paula and kind of her trajectory on the show and kind of seeing how unstable she was, I think that I'm by it. What happened, Mike? Are you of the mindset that is indeed what happened, or do you think that Corey Clark is just blowing smoke?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say like I'll split the difference on it, but I mean, there is a sort of appeal in like fighting the juggernaut almost and bringing a lot of attention to yourself. I mean, Corey Clark at that point in his career had done nothing, and I think you could look at it from his perspective that he was willing to bring some more notoriety to himself. I mean, in a similar vein, there were several contestants, I think a couple of years ago, over the years, several African-American contestants who tried to bring up a lawsuit against American Idol that the show was racist and that they were purposely getting rid of black people. And so you realize that in the entertainment industry, if people want to bring attention to themselves, and they might do it in the most ridiculous ways. Now, of all the people to accuse of having a nefarious relationship with, I'm assuming Paula Abdul might be at the top of that list. So it was a easy choice, I guess, but I still kind of feel bad for Paula if she had to deal with these inner demons, true or not.
Yeah, and there was one thing that I wanted to talk about too that was just interesting, and the one thing that really like made it stand out for me that it was legit was that apparently, and who knows, maybe it wasn't romantic like he was saying, but he said at one point that she was giving him tips on the songs he would use. So before, like in the semifinals, before it got to the top
there were
12,
tips.
10,
there were definitely tips.
He was told he was told to like pick some Journey song because that was when Randy Jackson was playing the bass for Journey apparently, and Randy was like, "Oh, great job, dog! I love that song. It was so good," and all this kind of stuff. And I'd have to rewatch it, but very, very interesting indeed if it did happen. But why do you think Paula, if this was true, Mike, what would motivate Paula Abdul to have an affair with a contestant on a show in which you're a judge?
I mean, American Idol was still they're still trying to figure things out. I mean, people who are in high places are able to abuse certain powers. Maybe Paula, if this is true, thought she'd be able to get away with it and would be able to use that to her privilege. Maybe thought she was just being a nice person. She was pulling a Monica Culpepper there. But yeah, it's if she did it, it's not great execution. The intentions are better than the execution there. I don't know. Maybe I'm a Paula Abdul sympathizer, but I don't know if I want to believe that she actually went through with that. And Jordan right now is doing, for all you audio listeners right there, is doing a great Paula impression of her. What's usually the way she was judging during songs is that she seemed like she was pretty coked out and just clapping along, standing and swaying, which was her definitive judging style. I'll leave it at that.
Tyler Kakuno in the chat says he's hot. Why else have sex with anyone? And Rob Sesternino says she was thirsty. So
she could have drank some of that Coke that was sitting on her judge's table for 8 seasons if she really was that thirsty.
That's right. Coke was a big sponsor.
Yep.
Of American Idol for years. Oh man, Paula and Corey Clark. Oh man. Okay. There was somebody I totally forgot. There was another person who was also DQ'd.
Yep.
Mike, and that was Frenchie Davis. And
yep.
I remember at the time I was in the 4th grade and I was at school, and my best friend at the time said, "Oh, Frenchie's going to win. I know it." Like, this was like at the very early on. He was saying, "It's over. Frenchie's going to win. She's the best by far," whatever. And then the next night or whatever, they were like, "Yeah, Frenchie has been disqualified because she was in what?" Now, what was it? Because at the time I really did not understand what was going on.
It was porn. There were dirty pictures of her that were leaked online, which is unfortunate. I agree with you. One of my best memories of American Idol was in Hollywood. Her and Kimberly Locke did a version of Band of Gold that I downloaded on Kazaa illegally because I was
oh my god!
Because to date this back to 2003 because I was so excited about this. I mean, she went on to have a pretty good career. She was in Rent for a little while. She went on to the first season of The Voice, and she almost made it to the finals. So she definitely made a pretty big name for herself, dirty pictures or not.
Yeah, she finished top 8 on that first season of The Voice. So I think their format was a little bit different in season 1, but if that format was the same, she would have been a finalist for that. So good for Frenchie. I mean, it seems like she's actually done some stuff. I was looking at her discography. I mean, she's come out with released some music over the years. So it looks like she's probably doing better than Corey Clark at least. So good for Frenchie. Glad that she at least put something together, because there was some other contestant, I think, as well, in season 7 or season 8 that also had pornographic images online.
Yes,
and
I think Antonella Barba, I think her name was. Or something,
yes,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they did not disqualify her. And Frenchie said, "Well, I'm glad that they didn't disqualify her, but I think it's kind of BS that they disqualified me." So, which is kind of true, but at least, at least they didn't, because I don't know, really. People do stupid things, and it's a singing competition. This isn't like, this isn't The Apprentice. Okay. Does it really matter if somebody has porn on the internet? I guess they're trying to be a family show, but at the same time, she was really good.
You know what? I say if they bring back American Idol, it should be all porn stars next time. Let everyone start out on equal footing. We all have our demons cast out, where everyone's going to be a porn star. Everyone knows each other's business.
Okay, well, could it be like former reality TV people that have done porn that are on? Because
Oh, I thought you
that
were saying like former reality TV people who are basically porn stars. I thought that was the connection you were making.
No, no, but
Right,
like,
right.
no, we could get Crazy James from Big Brother 9.
Yep.
We could get Dustin Zito from The Challenge.
We
could
get
get
Ozzy.
We could get Steven the Cowboy from season 10 of Big Brother. We could actually get, if I don't know if any of them can sing, but we could actually put together, maybe that's a new podcast we got to figure out, Mike. Maybe a Survivor season of people that have done porn. I think that would be entertaining.
I think that would be an after hours podcast. Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, we can't use our real names. We'll have to like blur out our faces so that nobody actually, when they do a background check on us, they don't realize that we did the podcast.
And then we'll get the voice changer things too, like when they have on those investigative shows.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So anything else from season 2 you want to touch upon before we move on to season 3?
No, the only person I really remember was Joshua Grayson, who was like he was a pretty good like country thing, but he had the Marine angle, which this is when we're starting to really see the beginning of like these sob stories and how that can really carry a person so far into the competition.
Yeah, and from him, I just remember that, yeah, similar to Gorini, kind of. I felt like women and like girls everywhere loved him because of the Marine thing. But he was actually a pretty good singer as well, no?
He was pretty good, yeah. We're going to see in a few seasons a streak of winners that might have been determined entirely by the young female vote. So these are the breadcrumbs that are starting to lead to this giant loaf we're going to see.
All right, so season 3 comes up next. And looking at the cast of season 3, I feel like the contestants were much more talented in season 2, in my opinion. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, the problem I think with season 3 is that this is when we started to see the more untalented contestants make it further. And I'm going to point to a couple of people specifically. There was a man by the name of John Stevens, who was, I think he was like 16 years old. He was this redheaded crooner guy who was not very good, but possibly because of the young female contingency, he kept making it through. Jasmine Trias was a young girl from Hawaii who I think the theory is she basically got all of Hawaii's vote every single time, and that's what pushed her through. And that's what we talked about shock movies before with Tamira Gray. This time we lose Jennifer Hudson and we lose LaToya London. And the two of them and Fantasia were known as the three divas, and they thought like these were going to be the top three. And Jasmine Trias and John Stevens kind of knocked them out, which was pretty shocking to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, Jasmine Trias, I mean, at least I think she seemed, and maybe I was biased at the time because I thought she was really cute, but I felt like she at least had some talent. John Stevens, I mean, even at the time, I just thought, what is this guy doing on this show? Why do we have this? And and as the seasons really go on, we have at least one person like this in the finals pretty much every year. They don't always get the John Stevens treatment, although certain people did, and we'll get into some of those a little bit later. But the Trias thing, yeah, I was looking, and apparently there were some issues with voting. Like, people couldn't get through the phone line sometimes, but in Hawaii, the votes were hugely, like, it was huge, the number of votes that were getting through compared to other states around the country. So there was controversy over that. Yeah, everybody in Hawaii was going nuts, and somehow, I don't know, maybe the phones were better in Hawaii in 2003 or 4, whenever this aired. But that basically, she made it to the final 3.
She made it to the 3, yeah. Yeah,
and then Diana DeGarmo as well. Was Diana DeGarmo that great? I mean, she came in second. She loses to Fantasia, but also 16 years old at the time. She didn't really, I mean, at least in my memory, I haven't heard Diana DeGarmo sing in years, but did she stand out to you either, Mike?
Not particularly. I think she was fine. I think of that top 2, Fantasia was the heads and above favorite. But I think she was fine. I think she was better than, if we're power ranking her, Jasmine Trias and John Stevens, she is clearly the top. And I think she held her own. I remember her singing like Holding Out for a Hero, I think, and it ended up, or Enough is Enough, one of those two, and she ended up being pretty good on it. She definitely made a name for herself, actually, on stage. Outside of that, she's most well known. She played the role Penny in Hairspray for a good number of times, including at the Hollywood Bowl. So she's doing a good job, though. Fantasia and Jennifer Hudson are the two big stars of this season, though for very different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Jennifer Hudson a little bit. I mean, you mentioned earlier there's Myra Gray was the first big shocker. Jennifer Hudson, arguably the biggest shock ever, really, on this show. And I don't know, maybe at the time it didn't. I mean, it did seem shocking, but I feel like she was somebody who people recognize it as talented, but maybe like not that. And I don't know. I didn't really have the greatest grasp of the online community, Mike. Was this the biggest shock in the history of the show of somebody going home?
So, I mean, of the three divas, I think Jennifer was probably in the most danger. The first couple weeks of like the top 10, or I think that's when they went to 12, I think, starting in season 2. But the first couple weeks, she was at the bottom. She was not doing too well, but she still was talented enough. But the way they structured this Final 7 results show was so hand-wringing in terms of like production. Basically, it was the three divas on one side of the stage, and it was John Stevens, Jasmine Trias, and Diana DeGarmo on the other side of the stage. In the middle was this guy named George Huff. And Ryan said, like, okay, George, you pick the group that you think is safe. And he walks over to the three divas, and Ryan says, George, you are wrong. And that was probably one of the biggest shocking moments in reality TV at the time, because these were these clear three front runners, and they all ended up in the bottom three. And I still don't know what was going on there. Like you said, it might have been something going on with the Hawaii vote or phone lines kind of being a little wonky. But I mean, it sucks that Jennifer had to go. I think, you know, if they had like an American Idol second chances, she probably would have been brought back, because I think people thought she was robbed, though. I would say arguably she might have passed Fantasia in terms of notoriety, but based on her work outside of the season.
Oh, certainly. I think outside of the show, Jennifer Hudson is by far, in my opinion, the biggest star from this season, because I mean, just as soon as she landed the role on Dreamgirls, and then, you know, she gets a Grammy nomination. Did she get an Oscar nomination as well for that?
She won the Oscar.
She won the Oscar. Okay, so there you go. I mean, and no other American Idol contestant can say that, especially Justin Guarini and
Kelly Clarkson. No, I think they won Razzies though. So they won. They
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny. I was looking at for that movie. They were They won a bunch of Razzies, and then they were nominated for Teen Choice Awards for like Best Breakout Star. Both of them.
Well, teens love. I think the teens love the acting that's breaking out on their face more than they love Justin Guarini and Kelly Clarkson's breakout performances. So, sorry guys.
Oh man. And again, Rob Sesternino in the chat was saying people get complacent, and I think that's honestly a common to explain the reason why Fantasia, Jennifer, and LaToya all ended up in that bottom three. And I do think that is a thing with these singing shows sometimes, is people think, okay, well, I know that person's safe, I don't need to vote a million times. Whereas with the youth vote, these young people who are like voting, or like these people who are like really passionate, but a whole state is voting for a certain person. Mm-hmm. They go hard every single time to vote for their favorites, whether, it's the Hawaiians voting for Jasmine Trias, or the young people voting for Diana DeGarmo because she's a kid, or John Stevens because also he's a kid. They go crazy. Whereas, like, you know, people who the average person's like, oh, maybe I'll vote once for Fantasia or Jennifer or LaToya. That kind of splits those votes up, and then that's kind of what happens there. George Huff also underrated. I don't know. At the time, I loved George Huff. I think George Huff is amazing. I don't think he ever did anything, Mike. But what did he sing "Lean on Me" at one point? He did he not?
I'm sure he did. I think that was a very female-dominated season, and I think George Huff was probably the best guy there, though that's not saying much. Though John Peter Lewis, who was like the Hobbit-looking pencil salesman, I think he came back on The Voice in like season 4 with as a duo, and he was great.
John Peter Lewis was on The Voice?
Yeah, he was in a group called Midas Whale, and that was actually one of my favorites from that season, because they were sort of like a funkified Mumford & Sons-esque group. So yeah, he made it cool. Reality TV.
I love John Peter Lewis. He was great. He was so awesome on the show. He was one of my favorites. I don't know why I loved him as a kid, but that's great that he made it on The Voice. So that's awesome. Anything else from season 3 that you want to touch upon other than maybe Quentin Tarantino?
Yeah, so this is when they really started to bring in guest judges, and sometimes the mentors of the week became guest judges to sit in. And one of them was Quentin Tarantino. And actually, Jessica Lees posted a Facebook status about this a couple weeks ago, and she probably put it perfectly, that the best thing about it was how you could tell how into the competition he was. Despite being a major film person, he was so minute on his details with everything, even though, he couldn't probably talk in a room with Harry Connick Jr. about musicality. He was still so concentrated on it. And let's compare that with somebody like Ellen several seasons down the line who just wanted to be nice and didn't really know anything about music. At least Quentin Tarantino is trying, which I think is something you can say about his film career in general. At least he's trying.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had never heard of Quentin. That was my first ever dealing, or I guess not dealing, but interaction with Quentin Tarantino, if we want to call it that.
Well, I can imagine you were 12 years old. I couldn't imagine you had like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs on your VCR shelf.
Yeah, exactly. And my dad, for whatever reason, was not a big Tarantino fan. So he's like, oh, why is Tarantino here? He doesn't know anything about music. And I remember that at the time and thinking, oh, okay. And then eventually as I got older, I just grew to love Quentin Tarantino so much. So very, very cool part of American Idol's history that Tarantino ultimately showed up for a week on the show. Finale ratings for this. So I don't think I talked about this in season 2, but season 2's finale had 38 million viewers. So that was the highest ever. But season 3 continued to be going strong. So unlike Survivor, which had the first 2 seasons with a huge number of viewers for the finales, and then all of a sudden Survivor Africa and so on and so forth, the ratings went downwards. American Idol still stays pretty strong. Season 3, we're in 2004 at this point. It's got 28 million viewers for the finale, and it continues to go strong even into season 4.
Yeah, and I think maybe the popular voting concept contributes to that. Maybe because it says you guys are involved. You're the ones that, if you're voting, you're compelled to watch the results and figure out what happens. Whereas Survivor, you're sort of watching it all play out, and it's not something that you have a personal involvement with. So maybe if you feel like you have a personal stake in the competition, it's going to draw you to the show more and more. Though I think we're probably going to hit its peak around season 5, 6, 7, around that area, and then it's going to start waning a little bit.
Yeah, well, I was actually, looking at the ratings, and we'll talk about this as we go, because I believe I have them for every season. It really did stay somewhat strong, at least for these finales, for quite some time, a lot longer than I would have expected. But yeah, that's really, at least, pop culture terms and that kind of stuff, that is kind of where we see the peak of the show. And then after that, it kind of petered out a little bit.
John Peter Lewis out?
John Peter Lewis out, yes. JPL'd out. Notable contestants from this season of American Idol. There were several people on this one. So first, I think we should talk about is the winner of season 4. And that is Carrie Underwood, who at the time was only 21 years old, Mike, and was an unknown farm girl who had never really done anything. And it's quite amazing to think about Carrie Underwood now, about 10, 11 years ago, seeing her then to what she has become now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was not a Carrie Underwood fan, and I'll preface this by saying I'm generally not a big country music person, but I was such a big Bo Bice fan on this season that when she won, I was furious. I'm like, oh, she's the worst winner ever. On Survivor Suck, people were calling her farm bot because she really seemed like a fembot and didn't have a personality. She just sort of stood out there and sang the song. Looking back, she is a extremely powerful voice, and she's neck and neck with Kelly Clarkson, in my opinion, in terms of who had the best career post-Idol. But at the time, I was not happy with the Carrie Underwood win.
No, and even Simon himself, the following season when Kelly Pickler was on the show, I remember Carrie Underwood went on and she performed on one of the results shows, and in response to Kelly Pickler, after she had a really good performance, Simon said that he thought she was better than the winner from the last season.
Yep.
So, really, Carrie Underwood didn't come out of the gate swinging, and it just her career really, it was just kind of like a slow burn, and then she really kind of picked up steam and exploded as time went on. But I'm with you in terms of her success, having her on that Kelly Clarkson scale. Bo Bice is another guy who really was Bo Bice the first rock guy to be on the show.
Yeah, so it was basically him and Constantine. This was the season of rockers, in that this was a genre that had never really been traipsed before, or at least not traipsed constantly. And I still think Bo is one of the best rock voices they've had on that show. I think there was this one performance he did of a song called In a Dream that he did entirely a cappella. And I remember that moment, this lone spotlight on him. And it was an absolutely gorgeous performance. And I feel like he almost sort of changed the game there, where Catherine McPhee is going to do the same thing in the next season. And it's something that had never been done before. So he definitely sort of blazed a trail for himself.
Yeah, that moment really sticks out for me. Him always is using the mic stand and holding it like as he would sing. Yeah,
like it's digging.
It totally was like he was digging. Yeah, he's holding it like a shovel and like yeah, and like singing like that. Bo Bice was awesome. He also, though, I mean, he luckily was upfront with his legal troubles in the past, but he had been arrested in 2001 for possession of cocaine in an Alabama strip club. So there was that. And he also had a misdemeanor charge. Or no, actually, no, that was not him. That was somebody else in the season. We'll talk about it a little bit.
Get your criminal charges on American Idol contestants straight, Jordan. Well, that's our Survivor season. Survivor, porn stars versus criminals.
Yes, that would be a great season. Okay, we've got to do that. That's on the list, Mike.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll come back.
Everyone who's listening, hold us accountable for that.
Yes, we're doing that. Porn stars versus criminals Survivor. Okay, so that was Bo Bice. I mean, possession of cocaine. Well, I mean, there's been worse things.
Who hasn't possessed some cocaine in their time? Exactly.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, it's just cocaine. Other than Bo Bice, Anthony Fedorov was a guy who I didn't think was that great, but it seemed like America really loved him at the time.
Well, he was another one of these sob stories where he had, I think, like a larynx difficulty when he was a baby, and it was one of these cases where I may never sing in my life, and he was able to, but yeah, he wasn't great. Fun fact, he did a show, he performed in Hairspray at the theater that I had done a show with, and so I had seen him, and he is kind of a jackass, apparently. So maybe he had a superiority complex from the fact that he was a living testament, a living miracle, but I don't know. Apparently he's got a big head about himself, even 10 years later.
Wow, that's crazy. Because on the show, they made him seem like such a really nice guy. And I remember when he got sent home, Carrie Underwood was crying. Yep. And then I remember my mom at the time, my mom was saying, "Oh, are Carrie and Anthony dating? Is that why she's crying?" And at the time, I was like, I don't know, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, that's so fascinating because that is not at all how he was portrayed on the show. Konstantin Maroulis, you mentioned. Konstantin is one of my personal favorites that has ever been on this show, Mike. I loved Konstantin Maroulis, and I was stunned when he got sent home. Were you?
Yeah, so we didn't talk about this in the last season, but last season there was an online movement started called Vote for the Worst, which was sort of Howard Stern claims he's the head of this organization, though that's debatable, where people said, okay, let's purposely vote through the bad contestants just to show what a mockery this show is. And this is one of the testament examples of how Vote for the Worst can work, where Scott Sable, who was this rather portly, ape-looking R&B guy, it was fine, but not as good as Konstantin. He made it through, and Konstantin got eliminated. I remember Paula Abdul weeping her eyes out as Konstantin got eliminated and was singing Bohemian Rhapsody. It was the biggest shock moment of the season, and I think it proved to the online community like, oh crap, this has a lot of power.
Vote for the Worst. I mean, as the seasons progressed, I grew to love it, but yes, at the time, very frustrating. And I believe, from what I was reading, Vote for the Worst was started via Survivor Sucks, Mike. Did you know that?
I guess so, but I know it expanded to its whole other website and became this whole big thing.
Yeah, but that was how. Yeah, that's how it originated. And then, yes, Howard Stern later on with one contestant, I believe it was season 7, who we'll talk about a little bit later, also it was behind this movement. But yeah, Scott Sable, my goodness, the worst finalist, I think, ever to make it as far as he did on the show. I think he made it to top 5, but I despised Scott Sable so much. And maybe this is because of the Konstantin thing, and I was really, really bitter about that. But he wasn't that good. I mean, he was like this he was just like this overweight white R&B guy. He looked like just, your average dude that you'd see at Walmart. And he just wasn't that great. He sucked. I don't understand. It blew my mind. But that goes to show the power of the internet, Mike. Yep,
absolutely. And I think definitely send a message to the community as well of like, oh, watch out. You better have your finger on the dial because you never know when your favorite's really going to go home.
Yeah, and it goes back to that complacency thing, I think, because was it the Bohemian Rhapsody week that he went home?
It
Because that
might
was
have
one of
been.
his, yeah, because that was one of his best performances. So from what, at least from what I can recall, um, Scott Sable also as well. I mentioned earlier there was a misdemeanor charge of disorderly conduct for domestic violence. There was Scott Sable, ladies and gentlemen, who had that. So yeah, so he sucks and he's a criminal. Scott Sable, the greatest person to ever live.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's a shoo-in for a criminal tribe now.
Yes, he really is. And yeah, Rob Sisterino brings up a good point of a fun fact about Constantine. If you've watched Shane Powers' audition tape for Survivor Exile Island, Constantine actually makes a cameo appearance at the end.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Constantine, like, Shane was like doing all this crazy stuff, and at the very end, like, just Constantine just randomly shows up, and Constantine's like, yeah, you gotta get this guy in Survivor. And it's like, why is Constantine in this guy's audition? And that's something that I have no idea how Shane and Constantine were friends. But if I ever have a chance to speak to Shane Powers someday, I will ask him that question. A couple other notables, Anwar Robinson. I remember him singing Moon River. That was like a really popular song. I think that he had really good range. He was a great singer, but I think he went kind of early a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, I think he went like 8th place, and I don't know if you're going to bring this up. There was another disqualification that happened on this season as well, which early seasons of Idol are rampant with disqualifications and criminal charges, apparently.
And I actually don't know which one you're bringing up here, because I think I might have missed this one.
So the way they started doing the semifinals this year was that they did top 6 guys and top 6 girls. So One of the guys that made it through was named Mario Vasquez. And I think he either got disqualified or left the competition, but a guy named Nico Smith, I think, who is baseball player Ozzie Smith's son, made it on instead of him. But I remember that being a big controversy because he had just been voted on. And then we learned that week, oh, never mind, he's not going to be on your TV anymore.
What did Mario Vasquez do again? Did we ever find out?
I don't know. Porn, doing cocaine, and hitting somebody. Let's just add all the charges.
All three. All right. One other thing that before we move on from season 4, we have to backtrack a little bit. Season 3, Mike, we have to talk about one person as well who did not make the finals, but swept the nation, was so popular. He was so bad, he was good. The great William Hung. And if you're not watching this live, or if you haven't seen the video of this, Mike is doing the William Hung She Bangs dance. Oh my goodness, how great was William Hung? He was amazing.
So this was probably the height of the bad audition phenomena that was Idol, because I think one of the things that I remember hearing from a lot of fans as the seasons went on is like, well, I only watch the auditions for the bad ones, and then I watch at the end. Idol became really synonymous with showing those bad auditions for a long, long time. And it's actually really interesting. You know, we just had 4 hours of auditions this past week. They barely show the bad auditions at this point. And maybe it's just a changing mentality with the country and these singing shows to highlight more of the talent above the bad talent. But it's so weird how the show almost became less mean as it's moved through the years.
Yeah, no, and it's good that they've done that. And I think maybe they picked that up from The Voice, because The Voice doesn't mess around. They just get good people, and The Voice has been incredibly successful over the past 5 years. But yeah, William Hung singing Ricky Martin's She Bangs is amazing. If you were not around at that time and you somehow did not see it, please go YouTube. That is hilarious. It's great. William Hung, an amazing human being. He went on to go release his own album.
2 albums.
2 albums, yeah. And I think he had a Christmas one, too.
Yes, it was called Hung for the Holidays. I do not, which I think was also the title of the porn that Frenchie appeared in.
Hung for the Holidays. Oh my god, that's so great. Hung for the Holidays. Yeah, the only album I had on the title of was his debut one called Inspiration. And Inspiration sold 284,000 copies, which is pretty amazing considering William Hung's singing abilities.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, Pop Culture Happy Hour, the podcast, did a sort of bit on American Idol this week, and their music correspondent, Stephen Thompson, brought up that the season 13 winner, Caleb Johnson, sold less CDs than Hung for the Holidays. So this is a big symbol of like, this is when Idol's really in its heyday, and we're going to see a few years down the line, it is going to fall out of grace very quickly.
Oh man. Well, yeah, really. I mean, it stayed like it kind of just fell off a cliff, and we'll get into that as we progress. But it's certainly. Taryn Armstrong says in the comments, "Why limit it to the holidays, Mike?"
Well, I don't know. People are feeling lonely during the holidays. They're with their families. That's probably the best time you want to be hung. I'm going to stop before we go full bloom on this podcast.
Yes. Okay, hopping back to season 4. The finale had for Bo Bice versus Carrie Underwood. The finale had 30 million viewers, still going strong. Any final thoughts on season 4 before we jump to season 5?
No, I mean, I think this was an extremely talented season in spite of the Constantine boot. I still think that the Carrie versus Bo finale is so interesting just because this is a definitive example of two very different styles. Literally, I'm a little bit country, I'm a little bit rock and roll. And it's very rare that we get those opportunities to see kind of two genres battle it out at the end.
Yeah, because if you think about the other finalists, right? I mean, Kelly versus Justin, both two pop people. Then we have Ruben and Clay. Also, I mean, Ruben, I guess, was more R&B, but I mean, pretty similar still. And then Fantasia versus Diana. This one was really, the most contrasting, absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I don't really think too often we have seen Final Two Showdown where it's kind of like that with two varying genres of music.
No, I mean, we have very similar ones. Season 9 is going to be the like mellow guitar finalists. Season 10 is going to be the country finalists. Season 11 might be. Season 11 was Philip Phillips, the sort of Mumford & Son folky guy, versus Jessica, her last name escapes me at this moment, who was the soul singer. Yeah, Jessica Sanchez. But season 13 is going to be the rocker versus the big voice. So like, it's been very similar throughout, and it doesn't help that we've seen a lot of like guy finalists as well, and those very rarely differ in terms of style.
Right. And Tyler Cocoon was bringing up season 8, the Battle of the Davids, which we'll get into. I guess they were a little bit differing, but
a tiny bit, yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get there. Okay. So season 5 airing in 2006. And this was a season where this was the season actually in my research before this. This season had the most number of finalists make it onto the Billboard charts in the U.S. And the most contestants as well who signed with record labels came from this season. So interesting that, I mean, as a whole, if we just look at them from a broad spectrum, a lot of people had success. But if we look at these people individually, none of them really, I mean, to this day, there wasn't anybody who was really that huge. And one person who did not win, at least in my opinion, has had the most success post-show. I guess there's a few people. We can't talk about season 5 without beginning with the person behind the Soul Patrol, Taylor Hicks.
Patrol!
Ooh, it's Taylor Hicks.
That was my harmonica noise.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Mike playing the air harmonica, sort of, not really. Taylor Hicks, the winner of season 5, who had, I think Taylor Hicks probably had arguably the most loyal fan base of any contestant that has ever been on this show. Because if we look at him compared to some of these people from this season, there's no way this guy should have won.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to look at the power of the South in terms of these votes. And we're going to see it, especially, I think one of the major reasons that Chris Allen won in season 8, which was a big surprise, is because the South is a huge contingency and you don't realize it. I mean, this was a Southern-born gentleman who even performed Georgia on My Mind during the show. And so I think Catherine McPhee did not have that sort of backing from an entire hemisphere of the United States as Taylor Hicks did.
Definitely not. No, and also too, just what I mean, even if you weren't in the South, though, I mean, even up in Canada, my family loved Taylor Hicks because here's this guy who looks like he's in his late 30s because he has all gray hair.
Yep.
Even though he was 28 or 27, whatever, but just so lovable, nice dude, and yeah, I mean. Not the best singer in the world, but he could still sing. I mean, he was still decent. So I guess that helped him for sure. Other notables from this season, we had Catherine McPhee, who was a very great singer. And you mentioned she did she did the Bo Bice at one point during the season. Although with Catherine McPhee, there was a little bit of like controversy at some points with her.
Oh, no, did she have a criminal record too?
No, McPhee did not have a criminal record, but there were rumors during the season that she was pregnant because she kept wearing like really loose fitting blouses. So there was talk that she was pregnant. And then there was also in like March at one point, there were rumors she was threatening to walk off the show entirely. And Seacrest actually talked to her about those rumors on air, and she was like, no, like this isn't true. But I actually, through Big Brother Canada, I actually have met some people who were producers on Canadian Idol. And at one point, Catherine McPhee did come up, and I guess she did some performance or something one night. And the person that I spoke to said Catherine McPhee was the most difficult person in the history of Canadian Idol they had on to deal with as a guest of the show. And they also had Mariah Carey on at one point.
Oh my God! Wow.
Yeah. So I think Catherine McPhee was a little bit of a diva, and she hid that pretty well. But yeah, interesting, her career arc. I mean, she's on this show, finishes in second, does a few things here and there. She comes on Smash. Yep. That show was Smash on NBC. Is that what
it was? It ran for 2 seasons. It was a pretty terrible show. She did a fine job in it for not being an actress. I would probably, I would rather see from Catherine to Taylor than I would see from Justin to Kelly at this point.
But then, I mean, she goes from that, which is a singing show, to now Scorpion, which is not a singing show at all. And I believe that show is still on the air, and she's still acting.
She's holding it down. So I would probably put her in the number 2 position as most successful from this season, with a big, bald, glaring number 1 clearly at the top.
Yes, and that big, bald, glaring person at the top is none other than Chris Daughtry. And Chris Daughtry, oh my God, I love Chris Daughtry so much. Chris Daughtry is my personal favorite from the show. I still have Chris Daughtry music on my iPhone at this point. Not ashamed to admit that. I love the guy. Great singer. Again, the rock thing is continuing. I guess the influence of Bo Bice and Constantine carries over into this next season. Daughtry, I felt like, was just clearly the best singer on the show. But again, we see him get eliminated prematurely.
Yeah, he was, again, if we're putting in the big pantheon of shock boots on American Idol, I would put him right up there with the Jennifer Hudson one and the Constantine one, in terms of, like, granted, this was very much farther in the competition. This was top 4, but there were talks of him being a lock for the final 2, whereas probably someone who I prefer, which is Elliot Yamin, was constantly scraping the bottom, and people were very shocked that he made it into the top 3, especially him making it above Chris. But, I mean, this is an example of a guy who, like, took what he had and ran with it. I think he was able to get his band back together and put out a few hit songs, one of which was used for the clip package to send people home. And so I feel like he was literally home. But I feel like this is the first big example of, like, someone who got successful from Idol but didn't win. And that even sent a message to future contestants of, like, look, there's exposure from even just being on the show that can make you even more famous than your winner.
Yeah, you don't have to win to necessarily be a success, and certainly this is a great example of it. Another person, Kelly Pickler from this season. I mean, Kelly Pickler was somebody who, I mean, I wasn't too certain that she would be huge after the show, but even now, I feel like Kelly Pickler is still doing okay, right?
Yeah, which is, she's a Dancing with the Stars winner. That definitely helps.
Yeah, so Kelly Pickler's done well for herself. Country singer Ace Young, who went on to marry Diana DeGarmo. Fun fact, he was on this season as well. You mentioned Elliot Yamin. We also had Mandisa on this season, and Mandisa is somebody who I would probably not have brought up, but Mandisa apparently is a Rob Has a Podcast fan.
Yeah, a newfound Rob Has a Podcast fan, which means she has all the more incentive to come on to our From Justin to Kelly podcast, and it'll be a real party with Mandisa now.
Oh man, yeah, get Mandisa, Dunkleman, John Cochran. I mean, it's going to be great.
Those are the top 3 people I want to have at a party. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've got a tweet here, and Rob was in the question thread on in the Rob Has a Podcast patron Facebook group. You want to be a patron of Rob Has a Podcast? Go to robhasawebsite.com/patron. She tweeted Rob December 9th, 2015 at Rob Sesternino. While I'm glad Spencer voted with Jeremy, Tasha, and Kimmy, wouldn't he have had a better chance at winning with goats, hashtag RHAP. And then someone tweeted her saying, fangirling at the fact that one of my favorite singers watches Survivor and keeps up with my favorite podcaster. And Mandisa tweeted that person back and said, LOL, I love Survivor, and this season is the best. I just discovered RHAP. Now I watch it every week. So there you go. So Mandisa, new listener of RHAP, which is awesome. So Mandisa,
she also is. She's also I don't want to use the term journalist, but she's on a new show in New York. I think at least I see on the subway there are like banner ads for this new show, and Mandisa is among them. Maybe she's like the culture or music correspondent, but she sort of parlayed her. You said before that this is the biggest number of finalists who parlayed this into record deals. And I would say this is one of the most talented group of finalists in the series. I feel like there were very few misses. I mean, you're talking about like Paris, who was this young girl who had a great voice, Ace Young that you brought up before. I feel like season 5 all around had just a really great group of finalists, which is a little disappointing because I would argue not the best vocalist won, which is a little bit of a dark mark on this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting how that works. Is so many great people, and then Hicks is your winner. But again, when you get these popularity contest type of system where you vote for the winner and you leave it up to America, this is what happens sometimes. If Simon Cowell and the crew, if they're picking who is going to win, probably a different story. In terms of controversies from this season, there was so I don't know if you ever heard of this, Mike, but there was this computer program called Dial Idol. Did you ever hear of this?
Yeah, I looked at that. They're sort of they're like a batch dialing system, right? And what they also did is from that batch dialing, they sort of always made predictions in the night between the performance and the results show as to who would get eliminated.
And so from that season, it was 87% accurate, these predictions that they made. So basically the night before or in the morning of the next day, whatever, you could figure out who realistically was going to stay or who was going to go. So that was an interesting thing. And it's just, I guess, as the seasons progress, we see, vote for the worst, and we see this Dial Idol thing. And then I guess as the show kind of, as it John Peter Lewis'd out, this kind of stuff didn't really matter as much anymore, and people weren't talking about it as much. Season 6. Okay, this season for me, 2007. So January 2007. So this was my first year of high school. I remember I was in grade 8 at the time, and I actually took a break from the show. So I really didn't pay too close attention to the season. Other than like one little controversy, though, that kind of pulled me back in because I found it very entertaining.
Was this controversy a person?
This was a person who, thanks to Vote for the Worst, kept advancing and advancing and advancing in the process. And that is the great Sanjaya Malakar. Sanjaya, amazing story throughout the season. Not the greatest vocalist there was, but thanks to Vote for the Worst, Mike, he just kept surviving and surviving and surviving.
Yeah, and we talked before about how there were certain moments where the really big question of like, are people sabotaging the show was brought up. This was like an extended conversation because, as you said, he kept surviving every week, and he was doing ridiculous things. I remember, I think during one of the Gwen Stefani episode, he had like a pony hawk where he made a bunch of ponytails into a mohawk. Probably his biggest moment was when he performed You Really Got Me, and of course it was horrible. And it cut to a shot of this one girl weeping in the audience. I remember what I was doing because I had actually been hospitalized with E. coli that week. And so my dad and I were watching from the hospital. And when that happened, like my mom immediately called me and we had to have a conversation about what the hell had happened because that was one of the most ridiculous things I had seen on live TV at that point. And maybe that laughter was the best medicine because I'm still alive to this day.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that's one way to cheer you up is seeing a little girl crying over Sanjaya. But yeah, Sanjaya just became such a cultural phenomenon. I mean, everyone was talking about him. He was, they did parodies on, I think, SNL and Family Guy. And he was in the movie Meet the Spartans. They did a parody of the girl crying and Sanjaya getting kicked into the pit, the Spartan pit and the thing. And I loved that so much. That movie was horrible, but I loved it just for that moment. But Yeah, Sanjaya was great. It would have been amazing if he would have won. What do you think would have happened, Mike, if Sanjaya somehow, if the Vote for the Worst campaign succeeded? Because Sanjaya, over the course of the finals, he got 38 million votes. So he could have potentially won if he could have kept that momentum going. Do you think that would have killed the show if Sanjaya would have won this season?
It's tough when talking about reality TV to really talk about the straw that broke the camel's back, but I'm going to sort of break the metaphor here and say that I think it might have really produced a max exodus from the show, because I think a lot of people that were voting would have said, like, why does my vote matter if I'm, this is a mockery of the competition if not the best person wins, and which would have sucked because season 7 is my personal favorite season that we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, we were in a very tricky position for a good while there, and he did end up finishing 6th or 7th, I think. So, so that was. It's good. He didn't make it too far that it became a ridiculous type of situation, but still, it caught the nation's attention for a little while of like, wow, there's a lot of things that might be invalidating the thesis of this show.
No, absolutely. But yeah, I wasn't watching, and then I heard about this Sanjaya thing, and my sister was telling me like, "Oh, I hate Sanjaya." My mom loved Sanjaya. My mom still loves Sanjaya. I was talking in the I was doing notes before this downstairs, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, remember Sanjaya?" And she's like, "Oh, I love Sanjaya. Sanjaya is great." And I was like, "No, Sanjaya was terrible, Mom." But yeah, my sister and I were talking about how hilarious. At the time, she was like, "You got to watch this. I mean, Sanjaya is so bad, and he just keeps advancing in the process." The winner of this season was Jordan Sparks, who at the time was the youngest one. I believe is Jordan. She won at 16, right? So is she to this day still the youngest winner?
I think Scotty McCreery won at 16 as well. So I think they might be tied.
Yeah, we'll get to McCreery a little bit later. But yes, Jordan Sparks, very likable winner. I really liked her overall. Blake Lewis, also another notable from this season. He finished in 2nd. I remember Simon Cowell at one point told him that he's not as good as you're not as good as you think you are to Blake, because he was a little bit, he was kind of cocky a little bit, Mike.
Well, he wasn't a great. He wasn't like a fantastic singer. I think he was a better musician than he was a singer. I remember his rendition of "You Give Love a Bad Name," which he was a beatboxer as well, and it sort of broke down to this sort of like drum battle between him and the actual drummer, and that was by far his best performance, so much that he reprised it in the finale. But I mean, I was definitely rooting for Jordan at that point. I get he's sort of like in a Diana DeGarmo place of like, he was not an outstanding performer that would go toe-to-toe with Jordan, but I think he was still fine enough to warrant a spot in the finale. But even though he did beat, in my opinion, one of the strongest contestants ever, which is Melinda Doolittle.
Yeah, and Melinda, that was another big controversy, was her getting eliminated, and even after the season, Simon said that Melinda should have won. She was the best singer. As somebody who didn't really pay that close of attention, was this bigger? Or was this on the scale of Jennifer Hudson or Chris Daughtry? Was it bigger? What was the public reaction to Melinda not winning that season?
I mean, I think it's a little tough when it's like the one right before the finale, because I think with the fervor of the finale, the boot shock is sort of minimized. But I think she was one of the most consistently strong performers that the show had ever seen. I mean, it makes sense. Her big story was that she's a former backup singer. And so she's very technically proficient, and she's used to performing on the road and keeping that endurance up. So she really had all the tools in the toolbox to do well on the show. And she did. It might have just been that maybe the Blake Lewis contingency happened to be more powerful. Maybe it's because he's a young guy. I don't know. I'm just making assumptions here. But she was a super strong performer, and it sucks that she didn't have that time in the finale to really make it her own. Though she does do I believe she does something on TV Line with Michael Osceola, I think. Every week they do like the American Idol breakdown. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So at least she got something out of it. There's one there were some people. I had people leave questions in the patron Facebook group, and Curtis Barton said, "What did you think of Blake Lewis's story of production manipulation? Do you think it's true? And if it is, how often do you think contestants stood up to people like Nigel Lithgow?" So have you heard about this, Mike? So Blake Lewis came out and basically said that Nigel Lithgow forced him to pick certain songs, even if the songs that Blake Lewis wanted to do fit according to a certain theme. So for the example he used was the British Invasion Week. He wanted to sing, what was the song?
Time of the Season.
Yeah, and instead, Nigel Lithgow said that no, you have to sing "Tobacco Road" by The Who, and Blake's like, I don't even know that song. So, well, yeah, what did you think about that? Do you think that who is Blake the villain here? Is Nigel the villain here, or is it somewhere in between?
I mean, I'm going to go with the political answer and say somewhere in between. I mean, it makes sense if you're producing a TV show that you want things to go a certain way. I think Nigel Lithgow is the type of guy, even from seeing him on So You Think You Can Dance, who has a bit of a head about him and says, like, I know what people want, and this is what people want. I mean, I could definitely see singers sometimes do have egos. You just told a story about Catherine McPhee. So I could definitely see this as not being the only instant that someone stands up to production, but I can definitely see production kind of swerving people towards certain song choices based on their catalog or what they might want to hear. But though I do think, ironically enough, that someone else did sing Tobacco Road that week.
Oh, okay. So interesting how that works out. Yeah, there was also an instance, I believe, the season before, in season 5, during Andrea Bocelli week, Taylor Hicks wanted to sing a certain song, but then Nigel said, "No, you have to sing this one. That doesn't. Andrea would never sing that song," and so he made him switch. So there's lots of stories about that. I'm not. Personally, I think Nigel Lithgow is a moron and he's an idiot. Just seeing him on So You Think You Can Dance, I'm not a fan of his at all. I think he's very full of himself. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seems like he's got the ego of someone like Mark Burnett, but he's nowhere near the level of Mark Burnett in terms of being successful with these kinds of shows.
Yeah, and I think that like you said, he probably thinks he's like, I'm a big reality TV pioneer, but he's definitely less so. He's the dollar store version of Mark Burnett.
Yeah, I mean, and really, I mean, Nigel Lithgow, he really lucked out with Simon Cowell. I mean, if he doesn't land Simon, and we saw what happened when Simon left and Nigel left and then he came back. He was not able to recreate the magic when Simon Cowell was gone. So
absolutely.
Nigel Lithgow, yeah, get out of here. I'm not a big Nigel, but I'm not the biggest Blake Lewis fan either. So, again, somewhere in between those
yeah, exactly.
two.
Yeah, that's like the lesser of two evils.
Exactly. Okay. Anything else notable from season 6 you want to talk about before we go to season 7?
I think I remember from fan reception at the time, this was regarded as probably one of the worst seasons. And I think even looking back on it, I think we talked about how season 5 had a breadth of talent. I feel like this was a much, much shallower pool. I remember, like, it was pretty much, again, like season 3, it was a female-dominated season between, like, Jordan Sparks, 4th place, or her name escapes me right now, but I remember she did a version of And I Am Telling You. Yeah, and Melinda as well. I feel like those were the 3 big names. So I feel like this was another one where the guys kind of paled in comparison.
Yeah, and that it's always good to have balance on these seasons, because when it's guy heavy or it's girl heavy, I don't know, for whatever reason, to me at least, those seasons just were not as interesting. And I'm just trying to look up the name of this person who you're talking about that finished in 4th, Mike, and this Wikipedia page is super long. Lakeisha Ann Jones.
Yes, it was Lakeisha Jones. Yeah,
Lakeisha Jones. So who was in 4th on season 6. Season 7. You said season 7 is your favorite season of the show, Mike.
Yes, I love it.
So why season 7? Was it because of the Battle of the Davids? Was it just the overall singers? What was it?
Yeah, I think it was the overall singers. I would say this is in competition with season 5 in terms of having the strongest crop. I mean, both Davids really brought a lot to it. You have people like Saisha Mercado. You have Jason Castro, who was this great sort of like, had the dreads, and he was like this very like easygoing singer. Brooke White had a really good voice. You have people like Michael Johns, may he rest in peace, Carly Smithson. I feel like this was a really just generally really strong group of singers, and it was almost a travesty to see a person go home each week just because it was a really fantastic group of people.
Certainly, even someone like Michael Johns. I mean, again, rest in peace. It's awful to hear about that, and I actually didn't know that he had passed away until I was looking into this a little bit more. But a guy like that, I mean, current season, a guy like Michael Johns would just destroy the competition, I feel like, and would win easily, hands down. Same with, Christy Lee Cook or Saisha, all Jason Castro, all these people were really, really talented. Carly Smithson. So very interesting. I remember Carly Smithson, I was shocked at the time that she wasn't signed prior to this.
Bit of a controversy there.
Yeah. So then, it came out, oh, wait. Carly Smithson was signed. And oh, wait, Michael Johns was signed. These people actually had record deals at one point. Carly Smithson had signed like a $2 million contract. Christy Lee Cook also had a deal. But the producer said that it was okay for them to be on the show because they didn't have record deals anymore. What do you think about that decision? Should they have just stuck to the peer format of no, if you have a record deal, or if you at least had a record deal at one point, you should not be allowed to be on the show? Or are you cool with them keeping these contestants on?
In a post-voice world, I'm comfortable with it. I can understand at the time you're looking for America's best undiscovered talent, and that doesn't necessarily go with the thesis of the show. But then again, if it brings on talented contestants, and it didn't necessarily help them. Carly and Michael, actually, I think they went out like one right after the other in like
they did.
eighth and seventh or something like that. So it's clear that people like the Davids were getting much more attention despite being unsigned artists, where it didn't really give them that much more favor in the game.
No, definitely did not. And but I thought you'd think it would, but for whatever reason it didn't. Who knows why that ended up that way? Maybe because everyone loved the David so much, or these other people. I think perhaps on a different season with more talent, like if these guys on 7 would have been on 6, I think it might have been a little bit of a different story in that regard. I'm looking at my notes here. Chikizi was on this season. Remember Chikizi?
Chikizi, yeah.
Yeah, I love Chikizi. Chikizi was great. He was awesome. Let's talk about quickly here 2 things. One, in my research, I found out that David Hernandez. Do you remember David Hernandez? He was 12.
Male stripper, yeah.
Yes. Male stripper. I did not know that. But yeah, he was eliminated in 12th. And Vote for the Worst did some research, and they found out that he was a male stripper in Phoenix, Arizona. He did some nude stuff. So that's very interesting. So David Hernandez was a stripper. All these Idol contestants have such interesting
so they all take naked pictures of themselves.
They do. Naked pictures are
they're doing drugs.
They're getting naked, they're doing drugs. That's what they like to do. Apparently, getting naked and doing drugs correlates really well with having a very talented voice. The 2 Davids, that was the big battle of the season. We have David Cook, who is the rocker, and we have David Archuleta, who's the 16-year-old kid, super likable. But there's rumors of his dad being like very overbearing and trying to control him and stuff like that. Were you a Archuleta guy or a David Cook guy?
Huge David Cook guy. I not only was he more seasoned, I loved what he did, and he was one of these people that really revolutionized this whole idea of making a song every week your own. I mean, he did these covers of Hello and Billie Jean and Little Sparrow by Dolly Parton and Always Be My Baby by Mariah Carey that made him literally his own, even though he might have taken covers from other people, and that might have been another controversy, but he really sort of set the stage for what a lot of these contestants would do later on, which is like, I have a definitive style. Let me take the song for the week and really adopt it to that. And he was able to benefit from that success.
Billie Jean, yeah, I remember him doing that. Pearl Jam, actually, or I don't know if it was Pearl Jam or if it was just Eddie Vedder who did it in that rendition. And then when he sang the Eddie Vedder style Billie Jean, everyone was like, "Oh, he's such a genius! Oh my god!" At the time, my dad was so mad because he's like, "No, that's Eddie Vedder. So who did that?" And my dad's a huge Pearl Jam fan. But yeah, just random. But very talented guy. I believe this was also the first season where they were allowed to use instruments on stage as well, right? Yeah. So that really helped a guy like David Cook, who can play the guitar and just really just put on a great performance. But interesting that David Cook, because to me, right from the get-go, he stood out as one of the most talented people on the show. And really, I mean, just from his initial audition, had the potential to be one of the most talented people ever on the show. Post-show, David Cook really has not done too much.
No, he did it. I mean, he put out a couple of songs that went pretty well, but other than that, like really nothing. No. Okay,
I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm being corrected. It was Chris Cornell, not Eddie Vedder, so I'm getting it wrong. Chris Cornell of Soundgarden and Audio Slave fame. Yeah, there you go. Goes to show how much I know about music. Thank you.
You're mixing up your hard rock voices.
Exactly. So Rock Central Pod is correcting me. It's Rock Central Pod knows what's up about rock music, I guess. Yeah. So there we go. So thank you. But yeah, so Chris Cornell was the one who did that. And thank you for correcting me there. But yeah, so interesting how, and not even David Cook, David Archuleta as well. I mean, had a few successful albums, but really since then we haven't heard too much from either.
Yeah, exactly. The last thing I remember seeing on David Archuleta was a Tosh.0 episode where there was a viral video about girls who were freaking out that David Archuleta lost, and then how Daniel Tosh did we're gonna make you conquer your video again. They had David Archuleta sort of guest star there, but yeah, he didn't really do much either. This is one of those seasons where we start to see a little bit less of a success rate, and which sucks because again, in my opinion, the most talented bunch overall did not produce the most successful type of clientele.
Yeah, and it's weird because in terms of the ratings were still very strong for this season. I mean, we're still in, I believe, the 20 million range for the finale, which in the year 2008, I mean, that's pretty huge for a TV show. I mean, not as huge as getting 20 million viewers in 2016, but still. Yeah. Pretty significant, but alas, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out for those guys. Anything you want to touch upon before we jump to season 8, Mike?
No, I mean, the one thing I will say in response to that, which I think is going to be a general answer to the question of well, why aren't idol contestants doing well nowadays? Which I think it comes down to who can make a good song. I think, as you said, David Cook is a phenomenally talented artist, but I don't think he's produced enough radio-worthy songs, whereas Carrie and Kelly, what they have that's worked for them is that they've produced these really great hooks that have become these really great songs. They wouldn't be successes if they didn't have great songs to sing. So I think one of the fallacies that comes with American Idol is that it's not just about having a great voice. You have to write a great song as well, which is why, segueing into season 8, is the reason why I think they brought on Cara Diaguardi as sort of a funnel for that aspect of the show.
Okay, because that's something I was going to ask you as to why, because this is a big thing. And this, for me, was kind of when I thought, okay, now the show is not, we're getting away from what we started with. They add another judge to the panel, Cara Diaguardi, as you mentioned. And beyond that, do you think there was any other reason to add her? Do you think they were grooming her to be Paula's replacement? Why do you think they went with that move, Mike? Well, other than what you said.
The show's starting to get a little long in the tooth. They're 8 years in at this point. I think this is when they're going to start to experiment, and we'll see a lot more experimental things this season. This is the first season of the judges save. And I know that they started doing it last season, but this is when they're going to have the songwriting contest where fans submit songs for the finalists to sing and they pick the best two. So I feel like this is when American Idol is going to start saying okay, let's start changing our formula up a little bit. They're going to go back to the 3 groups perform in a wild card thing rather than doing the guys versus the girls. So this is when a lot of changes start happening. American Idol goes through a little bit of puberty here.
What did you think of the dynamic of adding Cara, or Cara, as Simon liked to call her? Did you like Cara Diaguardi as a judge? Did you think she added any extra value to the show that we weren't getting without her?
So here's the problem. I thought she was a fine judge, but if you add her into an equation that totally works, she seems so extraneous. And that's why America crapped on her throughout this season. They said she didn't need to be there. I don't know why you're here. We already had a good thing going. I liked her much better on the Bravo reality show Platinum Hit, which was all about literally who writes the best songs. And it's clear she was in there for that aspect, but when you throw her into this thing that's still a juggernaut with this panel that people are still used to, you're going to get a little bit of a Cousin Oliver in that people are going to turn on you for trying to bring new blood into this franchise.
Yeah, and poor Cara, because she seemed like she was really nice. It just you already have a solid threesome, a menage a trois, if you will, and they've been going strong for 7 seasons, and then you just add another person into the mix. It's I don't know. It's sort of like in The Simpsons when they do the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie show.
Poochie, yeah, Roy.
And Roy, yes, exactly. Poochie, and also partially just Poochie was terrible, but you couldn't really add anything to the Itchy and Scratchy dynamic because it is what it is. You already know it is a 2-person thing. You add a third and it's no, this is not what I signed up for. So if you have 3, add a 4th, it just doesn't work. Singers on this season, really, male dominated season, really this time around. The 3 big names for me that stood out, Chris Allen, who's your eventual winner, Adam Lambert, who a lot of people felt should have won and has had the most success post-show from this season, and Danny Goki. Those 3 really stood out to me. What did you think about the Chris Allen versus Adam Lambert debacle that happened in the finale?
Yeah, so this is by far the biggest surprise winner I think the show has seen. Chris Allen was a big dark horse throughout this competition. I think he did some great performances. He did a great rendition of Ain't No Sunshine. He sang Falling Slowly from Once. He did a great version of Heartless, Kanye West's Heartless. But Adam was such this huge juggernaut. He was getting a lot of fan support. He was also a little bit controversial because at the time, Idol didn't like to acknowledge the sexual preferences of contestants, and Adam Lambert was pretty glam, and so people were making assumptions, but the show couldn't right out come out and say it. He couldn't come right out and say it, but so to have the two of them face down, I think Chris was sort of an underdog, and I think what a lot of people attest his win to is, again, that power of the South, and specifically his home state of Arkansas, like pump through votes constantly. That sort of it made him eke out the win. I think this might have been probably the second closest vote, only to Ruben and Clay, but I could assume it was a pretty narrow margin of victory for Chris.
Yeah, and there was also let's see. So there was 100 million votes in the finale. 38 million of those were from Arkansas, Mike. And yeah, Arkansas is a state in which there are only 2.86 million people. So basically, if these results are correct, then, or if they're legit, what it's implying is that these people voted for the show, I guess like 19. So every person in Arkansas voted 19 times for Chris Allen that night. Every single person. I mean,
over the course of what was that window? Wasn't it only like a 3-hour time span when the voting lines were open or something?
Yeah, it's only a 3-hour time span. So I don't know what was going on there, but Chris Allen's your winner. Adam Lambert loses. And yeah, the sexuality thing was very interesting. I remember I was working at the time. I was working at a bookstore, and there was like this really old religious lady that was there. And I knew that she did not like gay people, which I was just like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're an idiot, but whatever. And she would just always go to me and be like, oh, I love Adam Lambert so much. I have such a crush on him. He's he's a great singer. In my head the whole time, I'm like, he's gay. Like you're going to hate him as soon as like the show's over. But I was just like, oh yeah, Kim. Yep. Adam. Yeah, he's awesome. I love Adam. It was hilarious. And then after that came out, we never spoke of Adam Lambert ever again, but very, very funny dynamic. Okay. So anything else that we want to touch upon about season 8? I mean, really, other than the judges save, which it got used on Matt
Gerard.
Yeah. So it got used on him. I mean, I don't know didn't really make too big of an impact on the show. At least for me.
I would say a couple other memorable contestants. Going back to Danny Goki, he had another big sob story. This was the guy who I think had the dead wife or comatose wife.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the two. But the unfortunate thing that I remember Danny Goki doing was he performed Dream On, and he had by far the worst rock scream I've ever heard. You need to go YouTube that once you finish listening to this, because it is dreadful. But another fantastic contestant, Allison Irahita, she made Final Four, and she was this big rocker chick, and she was great as well. This had our first blind contestant in Scott McIntyre, who was not great, but he also had the sort of sob story thing going for him. And this is the first time he went to a Final 13, and they did like a top two. They did a double elimination right off the top. So it's clear, again, the franchise was trying out a lot of things, and it was successful in some areas, not so successful in other areas.
Yeah, Anoop getting in because of that top 13 thing. Yes, I loved Anoop. I thought Anoop was great, partially because I'm half East Indian, and I was like, oh my God, there's an Indian guy on the show. But yeah, Anoop was awesome. Okay, season 8. That season 8 is in the books. Or no, yeah, we're done with season 8. That was season 8. Yeah. So that was in 2009. Season 9 is 2010, and we see. Really, this for me was kind of when I was like, all right, well, I think I'm good with this show, because now we're getting away from what we really started with. Paula Abdul leaves the show, Mike, after a contract dispute, and to replace her is not somebody in the music industry, but the very beloved Ellen DeGeneres. And at the time, I remember a lot of people were very excited because, oh my gosh, this is Ellen, this is great, but when it came down to the actual judging, Ellen really struggled. Yep,
this is a square peg into a round hole. It's clear that, like you said, I think Ellen is a a very beloved person in the community. Her talk show had been running strong at that time, and I think the producers were saying, let's reinvigorate the franchise a little bit. We have this opportunity. Let's bring in a person that America loves. But Ellen is not a musician. And Ellen has been very, vocal about people she liked on the show. But when it comes to the hard facts of actually delineating out criticism, that's something she couldn't do. I remember even her guest spot on The Simpsons, she couldn't even delineate criticism to Mo Sizlak when he sang. So, it was an unfortunate trial period that didn't work out. And this is where we're going to see her, Kara, and Simon all vacate their seats at the end of this season.
Yeah, and that was and still though, it was kind of when I thought, all right, this show's done. No one's going to keep watching it, but people kept on board, and it was amazing. The finale for this season had 24 million viewers, which still blows my mind that, in a season without Paul, I guess you still have Simon and Randy, so I guess that's part of it. And that's why. Tyler Kakuno in the chat saying pants on the ground. Was that pants on the ground guy? Was this season?
Yeah, so this was an audition from a guy who is much older than the age restriction, but I guess they decided to bring him in for the fun of it. And he did a song called Pants on the Ground about how people are looking like a fool with their pants on the ground, gold in their mouth, hat turned sideways. I'm not doing it justice. Look it up. It's a really funny audition. I would put that in the top 3 with William Hung. And in season 7, do you remember the guy that's saying, I am your brother, your best? The
Yes.
guy that was like decked out in all white with the big plumey hat. So that was definitely like one of the more talked about auditions from the entire franchise.
Yeah, Pants on the Ground, actually, I think he got he got some coverage on TMZ for a little bit. Like, people, I remember at the time, I used to always go on TMZ.
Is he a male stripper too? Is that what the coverage was?
No, but
his pants were on the ground. That's why they would be on the ground.
Pants on the ground, male stripper. No, I think they were just like following him around and being like, oh yeah, here's what Pants on the Ground guy is doing. Clearly TMZ was a very credible news source, getting lots of very important news coverage out there. Lee DeWise is your winner of this season. Chris,
who?
Hey, you know what? Lee DeWise, I love Lee DeWise. I think Lee DeWise is great. I personally did not watch this season, but as an artist, like post show, my mom is like, I think arguably like the biggest American Idol fan there is. Eventually, like she dropped off, but she was loyal to this show. She watched it through this season, through the next season. I think it was like after Philip Phillips, I think is when she tuned out. But every season my mom would watch, and she loved Lee DeWise so much. So she was like, you have to listen to him. So I tuned into Lee DeWise. And as Edward Morris is saying in the chat, Sweet Serendipity, that song I think is fantastic. I'm a big fan of Lee DeWise. I think he's great. Crystal Bowersox finished in second. She also was pretty popular on the season post show. I don't really think she's done too much. Any other notable people from this season?
I think I would argue that actually the best person who benefited artist-wise from this season is a guy by the name of Casey James. I think he was the third place furnisher.
Okay.
I think he ended up putting out a pretty good song. Other than that, yeah, this is probably one of my blind spots in my Idol chronology. I was in college during this time, so I probably put Idol on the back burner and really didn't have the time to rewatch a lot of it. But I remember, I think there was a girl by the name of like Dee Dee Benanti who did a performance of Paint It Black that was fantastic. But there was, I think there was a guy named Big Mike, and I think those are the only two other people that really stood out to me.
Oh, Mike Bloom and Big Mike. All right, there we go. Have you ever been called
another nickname for you? Yeah.
Have you ever been called Big Mike?
In certain situations, in certain rooms of the house, and I'll leave it at that. I wish.
How tall are you, Mike? By the way, because I've never met in person.
I'm like 5'10". Antonio Mazzaro actually said on the Top Chef podcast this week that when he met me, I was a lot taller than he thought because I probably look and sound like I'm like a 16-year-old. So he probably assumes I'm like 5'5".
Yeah, see that like when Antonio Mazzaro meets me, he'll be like, "Oh, you're exactly how I envisioned you because I'm very short and small."
Well, when you're on a season with Zach Olenek, the Jolly Green Giant, you're bound to stand out as short.
I've never heard that Jolly Green Giant. I think that's a really good comparison. He's the Green Giant's son, and I don't know. I guess like I'm a distant relative of Russell Hantz. Maybe I guess that's like how it works in terms of how our heights worked out. Although I think I'm taller than Russell. I think Russell's like 5'2". I'm 5 foot. I'm 5'9" on a good day, Mike. So I think I'm okay. Okay. Season 9, move on from season 10. So yeah, we lose. Ellen leaves because she says the show is not the right fit fit for her. Simon leaves because he wants to go pursue. For the last few years of American Idol, at this point, he had been doing the X Factor UK and American Idol in the same year. So he was super busy. He decided he wanted to bring the X Factor to America. So he leaves American Idol in order to pursue that. And Cara Diaguardi leaves probably just because she was getting so much hate and vitriol from all of America. So Randy stays by himself, which really surprised me.
He is the oak tree of American Idol. He will stay with his roots planted in the ground until they have to excavate him from the earth.
Yeah, and he's staying there, dog. We got to give him props for staying true to the show. And Jennifer Lopez and Steven Tyler come in to the picture. What did you think about those two coming onto the show?
So on paper, I'm like, oh, this is exciting. We're bringing in other artists. I think one of the things I probably had to complain about, if anything, with the original judging panel is that like Paula Abdul was the only former musician to bring on. And so it was a cool concept. That being said, a lot better on paper than it was in execution. I think Steven Tyler turned out to be a hot mess who could not give criticism, and every other word out of his mouth was a swear. So he was not great. I think Jennifer Lopez was probably better in this incarnation nowadays than she was in this first batch. Maybe Randy and Steven dragged her down, but she didn't really stand out either, in my opinion.
No, she didn't to me either. I didn't watch too much of this season, but again, it was on at my house all the time because of because Gina Parhar's loyalty to the show. Notable contestants from this season. So, I mean, we have our winner, Scotty McCreery, who I don't know if you watched the show, Mike, but from what I saw of Scotty McCreery, I really hated Scotty McCreery with a passion. I really did not like Scotty McCreery at all. I thought he was a good singer, but I just thought this guy was so full of himself. And maybe I didn't get the full story because I wasn't watching enough of the show, but I was not a big Scotty McCreery fan. Am I crazy? Did I just not see enough of it?
I didn't really see him as being as full of himself as much as I thought he was just very one note. There was only one thing he could do. He was the low country singer, and he could only sing songs that were slow like this. And so he sort of took what David Cook did and sort of bastardized it in that every week he did that version of it. And so, I mean, he is actually one of the more successful Idol winners because country is a very niche but profitable market. But yeah, it's I wasn't as enthralled by him. Maybe it's because I'm not a big country person, but I thought he was a little one note. And Survivor Sucks pointed out that he looked like the Mad Magazine guy as well, which definitely sort of unfortunately sort of traumatized my image of him.
Oh yeah, Scotty McCreery. I never. What's the Mad TV dude's name? Like Alfred
E. Newman.
Alfred E. Newman. Yes. So there we go. Scotty McCreery is your winner. Lauren Elena. She came in second. Both these guys were really young, right? I mean, wasn't Scotty?
They were both
like
16. I think they were
16.
Both like 16.
Yeah. So and maybe that's why maybe I was jealous of him because I was also, I think, like right around that age at the same time. I was like, how is this guy winning American Idol? He's a kid. Oh my God, this guy sucks. So maybe that's where my jealousy came from. But yeah, Lauren Elena, I mean, I can't really tell you too much about her. She didn't really stand out too much. She was good. I guess she was technically sound, right? But
the star of the season for me is the third placer, who I believe is one of the best Idol contestants ever, and that is a young woman by the name of Haley Reinhart, who she did have some bad performances, but when she got a good performance, she knocked it out of the park. I recommend, after you YouTube Danny Goki scream, YouTube Haley Reinhart singing House of the Rising Sun or Benny and the Jets, because she slays it almost every single time.
Wow. All right. Mike Bloom using a sleigh. I like that.
Yes, queen.
Yeah, we're appealing to our preteen audience here with that. Yeah. Other person that I want to talk about too from this season that I really loved, and I was paying attention for a little bit because of a woman by the name of Pia Toscano, who I was madly in love with and I thought was amazing. And I don't know how she got eliminated when she did. I think she went out at like 9 or 8.
She went out like 10th. Yeah.
10. Yeah. That, I mean, boggles my mind. I was very puzzled about that. But I loved Pia Toscano so much.
And it was interesting because she actually bolstered a lot of think pieces, I remember, because I believe she'd been like the third or fourth female eliminated in a row. And this bolstered a lot of pieces about and this is when we really started the conversation going about white guy with guitar, which we haven't brought up
Right.
before. There's a string of winners from season 7 to 11 of happens to all be mild-mannered white guys who play the guitar. And I think there was a theory at the time that maybe this was happening because Idol's prevalent voting base were older women or younger women who just wanted to look at a cute face and a pleasant voice rather than going for probably a more Sparky type of talent, not a Jordan Sparky type of talent. But I mean, this was so this was another kind of key example with it where like this might have been a sort of something that those people could point to and say like, look, all these girls are going home. It's clear that there is a fan base that is favoring the guys above the girls, because there were some good guys. I remember James Durbin was really interesting, the 4th place finisher, because he was one of the first like hard rock / metal guys that they had on the show. And he also had this sort of sob story about like he had Tourette's, I think. And so like we hadn't really seen that before. Jacob Lusk was this Riffy Lusk was like this guy who could not sing a song without putting a million runs into it. But these people were getting through over people like Pia Toscano, and people were saying like, okay, is this show started becoming a mockery of itself, and that this talent is being, overshadowed by these cute faces?
Certainly, yeah, and but for whatever reason, I mean, the show still, though, Mike, I mean, despite these things coming up, was very popular, and it blows my mind that looking back at the ratings of this, but there were 29 million people that watched this finale.
Wow.
Isn't that great? Like, that's nuts. In 2010, I mean, still this show, no, this was 2011. So, I mean, still people are watching this show, and it's crazy. Other thing too, to go back to that other point, about the women thing, the judges' save was wasted at top 11 to save, I believe it was
Casey James.
Yeah.
I think his name was.
It was used to save him.
Casey Abrams. Sorry, that was his name.
Yeah, and so they couldn't save Pia Toscano when they wanted to. So that was just interesting that like there was no strategy behind it. I felt like they were just like, oh yeah, let's use it and get rid of it. But I guess they're not really thinking of it from that perspective. But interesting how that turned out with her and that whole situation. Anything of note before we go into season 11? And I feel like once we hit 11, after 11, we're just going to fly through this thing pretty quick.
Yeah, let's get through the last 5 years, because after this, we're going to start really seeing the drop off of Idol.
Yes, and this is kind of when the show dies. I mean, we had Steven Tyler and J Lo kind of kept it going for a bit, but it started losing people after that. When you get rid of Simon and eventually Randy goes and Paula, and just the original format is completely different. The only mainstay is Seacrest. I honestly was surprised that Dunkleman just didn't take over his job at one point. I was anticipating that to happen somewhere along the line. Season 11 in 2012, we have Philip Phillips is your winner. Again, white guy with guitar. Jessica Sanchez, Joshua Leday. Those are some well-known names from that season. Steven Tyler and J-Lo leave. They're replaced by Keith Urban, Nicki Minaj, and Mariah Carey. And that led to the big drama between Mariah Carey and Nicki Minaj, which was really, I mean, if the show was trying to do that, just if they were putting that on to get ratings, good on them, because I feel like that was a big reason why people were tuning in.
Yeah, so I'll just, since we're kind of skipping to season 12 here, just a couple of highlights from season 11. I think Philip Phillips, despite getting the white guy with the guitar thing, he was a very good performer. And I mean, Home, the coronation song, is one of the best, not only winner songs, but songs to come from Idol in general, to the point of where it was like the theme of the Olympics, I remember. And Philip Phillips, again, he was a little one note. He got a lot of comparisons to Dave Matthews, and he always made faces like he was constipated. I believe he also passed several kidney stones during the season as well. We had to get elective surgery during it. But I think he deserved the win. There was Jessica Sanchez, as you said, was a soulful singer, but she was the only person to ever get the judges' save and make it to the finals, which was interesting. And there was another one by the name of Elise Testone, who, for some reason, there's a one person every year who always gets crap from the judges, but still makes it pretty far into the competition. And this time it was Elise, who I thought had a really great rock voice. But yeah, those are the few highlights. It was a pretty middle of the road season.
Yeah, and I apologize. I talked about the judges. Those guys came in on season 12, not season 11. So that was my bad. You can tell that I did not watch these seasons because I did not know that they were not judges on Philip Phillips' season. And just to piggyback off what you said, I do find it. Philip Phillips is amazing, great artist. There was some controversy and stuff and drama with his family asking him to like give money to like help their pawn shop or something after the show. And he refused to help them out. And he just was like, no, I'm cutting out my family and I'm only taking care of myself. So I think some people kind of thought he was a little bit of a dick, but very talented nonetheless. And I just also found it interesting, Mike, that two of the most successful people from the show with two very successful songs with the exact same name, Home. You'd think that they could get a little bit more creative, especially with Philip Phillips' song. Was that not like a song given to him to sing by the producers? Yeah. So I was like,
exactly.
Can't you? It's so interesting that they couldn't.
There are only so many words that exist in the English language, I guess.
I guess they just had to use the same title for the song. Why not? Okay, so not the craziest season, but yeah, season 12. That was Candace Glover won that season, and then that was when J-Lo and Steven Tyler leave. They're replaced by Keith Urban, Nicki Minaj, and Mariah Carey. And this drama was all over TMZ. I remember seeing it all the time. It was very entertaining. Mike, do you remember the details of that whole situation?
Yeah, so basically this was leaked by TMZ before the season actually started, was that like Nicki Minaj and Mariah get into this argument during auditions, and it was very clear Mariah Carey is going on in interviews after the show to talk about how they did not get along whatsoever, and some have theorized that maybe, she was brought in to contest Mariah Carey because Mariah Carey was the one that was first announced. This is, in my opinion, the worst season American Idol has ever had. This is the one where, so after 5 straight seasons of White Guy with the Guitar, people have been saying that production tried to manipulate the pool so that the girls would win. This is the one where all the girls in the top 10 finished in the top 5. It was a sausage slaughtering as all the guys were eliminated summarily, one right after the other, which was deserved because none of them were very good. And it stinks because Candace Glover is a fantastic artist, in my opinion. I think her performance of a song called Love Song is one of the best Idol performances ever, as Randy sort of, he hyperbolized it during the performance itself. But it kind of sucks because the season itself was not great.
Yeah, I have nothing to say because I didn't watch this season. But yeah, when your biggest drama and the selling point is 2 judges fighting, it's not really that great of a season. To pick up on, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, not to mention the fact that Nicki Minaj and Mariah Carey were also not very good judges. You would think that like, they're these, they might bicker back and forth, but they have good notes for the contestants, but they really, again, didn't. They still, the producers still had yet to find this formula of a former artist who had good notes before they found Harry Connick Jr., who I think brought a lot out of Keith Urban and Jennifer Lopez in terms of their critiquing style.
And I haven't paid attention to the show, so I'll take your word for it, Mike. I have not been watching the last few years, but I can certainly see that. And from what I saw of Mariah Carey and Nicki Minaj, it was not good. Piggybacking off what you said, it was the North Carolina auditions, and she said, apparently off camera, Nicki Minaj said, quote, "If I had a gun, I would shoot that bitch," in reference to Mariah Carey. So there you go. Nick Cannon said later that it was a publicity stunt by the producers. So who knows?
We must trust the star of Drumline in all matters when it comes to he shed, she shed.
Yes, absolutely. Nick Cannon, he is such a trustworthy source of information. Anybody who works on America's Got Talent. This is kind of where the ratings kind of finally did drop off a little bit. Because in the season 11, we still had 21 million viewers for the finale. In 12, it went down to 14. 13 was when, so Randy, Nicki Minaj, Mariah Carey, or no, I guess Randy had already left because Keith Urban had come into the picture. But
no, Randy was in season 12, but Randy,
he was a mentor, right?
he did it. He took like a semi-retirement in that he stepped down from being a judge, but in season 13, he was still a mentor. So what had happened is, I think in seasons 10 and 11, this guy named Jimmy Iovine, who is a record producer, was the constant mentor. So they didn't bring in a mentor every week like they did in past seasons. Instead, they would sing for him and he would give notes, and they use that in the prepackaged segments before the performances. That title was bequeathed to Randy and is now filled by the name of a guy by the name of Scott Borchetta, who has a sort of a creepy goatee, and I think he's credited as the one who like discovered Taylor Swift. So they've sort of assimilated into this one mentor role rather than bringing in a different person every week.
Okay. So interesting how that worked there. So yeah, so 13 as well. You mentioned earlier, Harry Connick Jr. comes in. Anything of note on this season? I mean, Caleb Johnson is your winner. I don't know. There was some controversy. He did an interview on AfterBuzz TV. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think what had happened was, I think there was like a bad result show. He didn't go home, obviously, since he was the winner, but I think a bad result happened, and I think he called he used the blanket term of, I know, again, these are his words, not mine, retards, to describe the fan base of American Idol, and he got a lot of flack from that. And he later tweeted out an apology, and obviously he still won because of it. Season 13 is interesting because I would call this the season of the singer-songwriter. So just to describe some of these highlight people here, Caleb Johnson was a rock, like an 80s hair rock guy.
Okay.
Which is super weird to see him win because he is basically like 30 years past when that was popular, which is another reason why his album sales have tanked. Jenna Irene was second place. She was this big voice who actually got in on the wild card, and she made it all the way to top 2, which is definitely saying something. The people who finished in 3 and 4, I think their names were Alex Preston and Jessica Muse, and they were both singer-songwriters. And actually, one week, they got to do their original songs, which is something that had never been done on Idol before. So I always thought that was a really cool touch. But other than that, yeah, I think these were pretty talented people, but overall, their reception went over like a lead balloon.
Yeah, when William Hung is outselling you record-wise, I think there's definitely a bit of a problem there. Wow. Caleb Johnson using the Adam Jasinski dictionary to describe people. Never a good move. You never want to go with 8-ballers vocabulary. I do want to bring up probably one of the worst things they've ever done on American Idol on a live show was this one guy named Sam Wolf got eliminated in 5th. And what Ryan Seacrest did was he brought the other 4 on stage and said, okay, now you're all going to vote as to whether we should keep Sam or get rid of him. And it's sort of like the coach's twist. If all 4 didn't vote to keep him, he was going to go home. And as a result, he went home. Well, in fairness to them, I mean, if you're in a competition and someone gets eliminated and it's not you, I feel like you would be like, well, I love you, Sam, but I'm in it to win it myself. So see you later. Is that? Yeah.
No, it totally makes sense from a competition standpoint, but from like a popular standpoint, I mean, granted, these were the top 4, so it's not like they were ranked over the coals, but still, like, it's got to be in a tough position to be on TV and be like, you have to look this person in the eyes and deny them the right to pursue their dreams and become the American Idol. It's a really tough thing to do.
So how did that play out? Did they all do it? Was there a few people? Was there only one person?
I think a couple of people voted to not keep him. And I think Caleb Johnson was one of them, actually. Because like you said, I think they said like, it's not fair in the sense of competition if he had, and he had also been saved. He got the judge's save earlier on in the season. So that would have been an Aussie Luke's SX third chance at this game. So I feel like it makes sense, but in terms of the popular spectrum, it was not the best thing to do in the eyes of the audience.
No, definitely not. But they're trying for anything, I guess, really at this point here. Okay, so that finale had 10 million viewers. So again, this is like signs that we're dying here. Season 14. I was gone in a magical land when this was airing, Mike. So what really? Nick something one I saw. I mean, I don't really know any. Yeah. Okay, so anything interesting from that past season?
Yeah, so this was where, because it had been performing so poorly the past couple seasons, Fox came to Idol and said, okay, you are now downgraded. You could only do one show a week. So the results show basically got cut. to make up for this, they instituted a horrible production idea, which was, okay, so we'll have everyone vote in the week in between. What will happen is, on any given show, everyone will sit in chairs. And when you're safe, your name will get called and you'll get to perform. So this provided several horrible logistics, which was basically, A, people were a lot more shaken because they had just learned they were safe, and so their nerves were jittery, and it led to less good performances. And at the same time, you had this poor person who spent an entire week performing a song for that week, only to find out at the very end, oh, sorry, you're not going to get to perform it because you're going home. It was very awkwardly structured.
Wow.
And so it just, and like, it was very confusing as well, because, you know, you'd have to figure out, like, okay, is this the top 12 elimination show, or is it only top 11 because 11 people perform? So it was very confusing. There were some talented people here. I feel like Nick was fine. He really came into his own near the end of the season. There was a guy named Clark who was my personal favorite. He was a very soulful Southern guy on the piano who killed these performances. His performance of This Is a Man's World, I still absolutely love. The third place finisher is a girl by the name of Jax, who is like this sort of edgier type of rocker. There was a girl named Joey Cook, who sort of represented the Zooey Deschanel adorkable type. On the other end of the spectrum, there was this 15-year-old named Daniel Seavey, who might be one of the worst contestants Idol has ever seen. He was clearly not prepared for this competition, but because he had like these sort of Bieber-esque audience follow him, he made it all the way to like 8th place or something.
Oh, wow.
And even in the middle of the season, they said, oh, we're going to start using the Twitter save. So then what they did, instead of having someone be eliminated outright, was they said, okay, you guys are the bottom two. You're going to perform. East Coast people are going to vote on your performances for the next like 15 minutes. And whoever gets the least mentions goes home.
So similar to they stole the voice, the concept that The Voice uses. Interesting.
And they stole a lot of things from The Voice as well. Specifically, and as I mentioned a long time ago, the shift in focus from the contestant to the judges. We now have, during a person's performance, the camera's going to cut back to the judges several times during it, which you don't want to see. I don't care what J-Lo's doing while this person's performing. I want to see them singing, you know? But I think the production was so centric on like, we're going to make this all about the judges because the judges are going to be the whole focus of the show, when they're really not. This isn't The Voice, but because they decided to skew the focus towards that, I think it led to the degradation of the season in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't realize that that's what they were doing, but it can't just be a cookie cutter thing. I mean, it's different when you're focusing on the judges, and one of those judges is Blake Shelton, and another is, you have Adam Levine. I mean, the personalities they have on The Voice are really what makes it makes the show in terms of like them focusing on them. It can work because they're such great personalities. But if we're focusing on Harry Connick Jr., Jennifer Lopez, and Keith Urban, are we really getting that same experience? I don't really think so. And when it's not a team, like when it's not like Team J-Lo versus Team Keith versus Team Harry, you're not getting that same dynamic that you get from The Voice.
Yeah. So to mention a couple of other things, I actually thought, going back to season 13, actually, I think Harry Connick Jr. is a fantastic addition to the show. He had guest mentor during season 12, and you could show he was a great combo of personality and musicality knowledge to him. There was a bit of a controversy during season 14 where there was a contestant named Quentin Alexander who a couple of his friends had finished in the bottom two, and Ryan Seacrest is like, you look like you have something to say. And he said, like, this is stupid. I just think this is basically, he said, like, he said in PG terms, this is BS. And Harry Connick Jr. actually got in an argument with him saying, like, you came onto this competition. It's not your right to question the logistics of it. And I believe Quentin either got into the bottom two or was eliminated the next week because he got into the fight with Harry. So that was probably the most drama that had happened that season.
That's interesting. Although I'm kind of like, I mean, it goes back to like not as extreme, I guess, as Gorini going at Simon saying, well, what do you guys think? But interesting how in the later seasons at the beginning, we still have that kind of thing with different judges there. So that's pretty much it, Mike. I mean, did you watch the show season 15, the final season premiered this week? Is there any format changes or anything different that you know of so far for this season coming up?
The only thing I know is that they have truncated the season, so now it's running from January to April, rather as usually they did the half season format of running from January all the way to May. I don't know what they're shortening if that's the case. I know in around season 11, they've changed the semifinals format a little bit to have it only be like 2 weeks as opposed to 3 or 4. So that might be what they're deciding to get rid of. But yeah, they haven't announced directly how they're doing the live shows, which, as I just talked about, was the big crux of my disagreement with the last season. So I hope they steer away from that this season. I hope Fox at least, throws them a bone and gives them back the results show, because that makes things a lot less awkward for the performance show. But I guess we're going to have to see.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if they already went that route, I wouldn't be surprised if they already are shortening the season. I feel like that's kind of like they're trying to make it as like small as they can. So I wouldn't be too shocked if that's more so with.
Yeah, going out with a whimper than a bang, it seems like.
Yeah, exactly. Thoughts on Kanye on the premiere?
I mean, yeah, this was another, not as big as the Mariah and Nicki fight on TMZ, but this was another thing that was leaked over the summer, was that Kanye West had auditioned for American Idol. I mean, the segment itself, I think, was like only 5 minutes long, and so it was just like a nice little thing. I don't know why it had to happen. I mean, Ryan Seacrest is like the creator of the Kardashian empire, so maybe he decided, maybe he reached out, maybe they reached out to him. I mean, Kanye is also not a singer, so the fact that he went in there and rapped, it was like, okay, that's great. This is Kanye West. Woo. And it wasn't even that funny either. Like, if it had been like humorous, I would have enjoyed it. But the fact was, like, he went on and rapped, and nobody was really. Maybe it's because they know that Kanye West, doesn't, to the point of where people are making jokes about him copulating with fish, about how much he takes himself seriously, that Harry and Keith didn't even want to try joking with him. So I think it was just a really awkward moment, in my opinion.
Oh, great South Park reference. Yeah, I think it would have been better. Yeah, I'm with you. It wasn't very funny. It was just like, all right, like, it's Kanye. I mean, whatever. I think it would have been great if they would have got someone like DJ Khaled, who it would have been like, I don't know if you follow DJ Khaled on Snapchat,
I do
Mike.
not know.
Okay, well, I'm sure some people listening to this do. But DJ Khaled has become like such a joke and parody of himself. It's very funny. I think that would have been something like that, where it's like an artist comes on and they're like making fun of themselves. I think that would be great. And yeah, people in the chat are saying another one, DJ Khaled. Yeah, you definitely.
I'm gonna have to check this guy out now. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with? You're not familiar with DJ Khaled?
Nope. The only DJ I know
is
I'm most familiar with DJ Tanner, and then the DJs on my list sort of fall into obscurity from there.
Oh, DJ Tanner. All right. You definitely, if you have not checked out, if you have Snapchat, definitely follow DJ Khaled. He's so funny, and check out DJ Khaled stuff. He's this like Middle Eastern guy who is like he's a DJ. He's helped put together collaborations of songs with multiple rappers. He's very it's hard to tell if he's like making fun of himself or he actually thinks that he is the way he is. It's kind of like Coach on Survivor, but it's really great and amazing to watch. It's so funny. Yeah, he got he got lost on his jet ski once on Snapchat. It's great. So DJ Khaled, check him out. Yeah, it's very funny, Mike. It's very funny. I think the video is on YouTube. But yeah, very plump rapper. It's great. He did an interview with Larry King, and Larry King point blank asked him Khaled, how did you gain all the weight? Like, that's like, he just said that point blank to him one time after DJ Khaled went on a huge rant about how successful he was and how he's like motivated to be like a great person. And he talked about losing 100 pounds. But anyway, very funny. Check that stuff out. Sorry for going on a DJ Khaled rant, but clearly you guys can tell that I love him very much. Okay. I don't want to go too much longer on this because I've been hogging all the bandwidth on reality TV RHAP-ups this month. So before we wrap, let's give you rapid fire questions for you, Mike, and then we'll wrap things up before we get out of here. Top 5 winners, or maybe not even top 5 winners, like top 5 American Idol alumni for you.
Again, this is very biased because I definitely have a preferential style in terms of music, and I will unfortunately admit that I'm not a big country fan. I mean, I would say Kelly Clarkson is very much up there. I put Haley Reinhart up there. David Cook. Give me some Bo Bice. Why not? And you know what? I'll throw a bone to Carrie Underwood in there as well.
Okay.
Just because I do actually, for not being a country fan, I do like the music that she did after the show.
Okay. For me, I'd go Chris Daughtry, Carrie, and then no particular order. Chris Daughtry, Carrie Underwood, Kelly Clarkson. I would probably Jennifer Hudson, just because of what she's done post show, and then maybe Catherine McPhee, Philip Phillips, one of them. I would love to throw Ruben in, but Ruben just did nothing after the show. So.
Well, no, he made an appearance on The Biggest Loser.
That's right, and he was in Scooby-Doo 2. Did you remember that, Mike?
Monsters Unleashed, and he also appeared on the short-lived American Juniors, where he got to sing A Whole New World with some kid.
That's right, American Juniors. I totally forgot about that show. I loved that, by the way. That was really good, although some of those little kids were not that great. Okay, judges in order, ranking them. How would you rank them?
Oh boy, maybe I'll put them into tiers. Maybe I'd say sure. Like I put Simon and Harry Connick Jr. in one tier. Maybe put Keith Urban in there as well. Okay. Middle tier would probably be a lot of the other ones. Give me Paula, give me J-Lo, give me, if you want to put Keith Urban in there as well, give me Cara DioGuardi. I think she had some good input as well. And then bottom tier is going to have to be Ellen, let's see, Ellen, Mariah, Nikki, and
Randy? You forgot Randy.
I'm gonna put Randy. I'm gonna put latter half Randy in there. I think first half of his Idol career, Randy, I think was fine, but he definitely sullied his image by coming back for multiple seasons.
Okay, who of those bottom tier was the worst?
I mean, it's real. I'm thinking between Steven Tyler, Mariah Carey, or Nicki Minaj. It's got to be one of those three, because at least I enjoy Ellen. Those three just seem to have unpleasant personalities. So I don't know.
Interesting. My mom loved Steven Tyler on the show. She was Steven, although maybe it's just, I don't know, my mom just likes Aerosmith or something. I'm not sure, but I'd have to ask her. But interesting they say, because I don't know. Me too. I personally didn't think Steven Tyler was as bad as Mariah and Nikki. And even, honestly, I mean, I hate to say it, I loved Ellen, but I thought Ellen was really, really bad.
No, she was a bad fit for the show, which even she realized, which actually boosted a little bit in my book.
Yeah. That's true. She at least had self-awareness about it, whereas I don't think Nikki or Mariah would. But I don't know. I guess let's just say Mariah Carey, just because we just don't like Mariah Carey. Okay,
yeah, because she's a diva on top of not contributing anything to the season, aside from she threw glitter on Candace Glover after she did that love song performance that I mentioned before, and that's her only contribution to the season.
All right. Wow. Okay. Well done, Mariah Carey. And then Simon, I think we can agree, is the best person on this show, right? I mean,
I think he was one of the reasons why. And they did this whole retrospective before season 15 premiered, actually, that featured interviews from the judges. And one of the things that somebody said was, we needed Simon on there because this was sort of the voice that America had almost. Nobody had really vocalized on TV like, you are not a good singer, I don't like this about you. And so Simon Cowell, he did bring in a lot of vitriol because of that, spoke for a lot of people. And that sort of, I would say that the show became immensely popular almost because he was able to do that, because he sort of America was able to sympathize with what he was saying most of the time.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, like watching the public perception of Simon evolve, because at the start, Simon was the mean guy and the hard, like the tough judge and all this stuff, and he used to say like rude comments and all these sorts of things. But as I guess maybe as our society evolved and people, or maybe just people got used to the idea of Simon giving constructive criticism, everyone grew to love Simon Cowell. And most of the times, at least when I was watching, I pretty much agreed with everything. Simon was always on point with everything that he would say. Yeah,
it's very indicative that there are a lot of all the singing shows and judging shows that came after. People were saying, "Oh, they're just trying to be like Simon Cowell. They're trying to be the Cowell of the panel." I think he had a huge effect on this judging reality show, much more than Randy and Paula did.
Oh yeah, definitely. Paula and the clapping, Randy with his dogs. Nah. Simon certainly, those guys pale in comparison to Simon, for sure. Okay, a couple quick questions for you, Mike, before we get out of here. Jorge Alvarado asks, who was shafted most by the American public, Mike?
I mean, It's tough because should we go with someone who we think was an early boot and would have done better on, or do we go with someone who should have made it to the finale? Because I'm inclined to go to the more to the former and say someone like Pia Toscano, who could have done much more in the competition. Whereas I can understand Chris Daughtry was robbed, Haley Reinhart was robbed, Melinda Doolittle was robbed, but they only had a couple more weeks to do it, and they still found success after the show. Whereas Pia, I feel like could have became a huge star had she not been eliminated in 9th place.
Right. And I can co-sign that as well, because I think that Jennifer Hudson's the one that really comes to mind for me, but it honestly didn't matter for her. She went off and was very successful anyway, and it wouldn't have mattered if she would have won. And Fantasia, I mean, look, Fantasia won. Hudson finished 7th, and I don't think her winning would have gotten her anything more than she would have already achieved just on her talent alone.
Yeah. Plus, there's a website that I love to go to as a data nerd called whatnottosing.com, which sort of compiles all the Idol performances and sort of gives them ratings. And what they did was every offseason they just ran the hard numbers and said, like, if the person who had the lowest rating got eliminated each week, how would they do? And I'm pretty sure Pia Toscano, if she didn't win, she made it like to the end of this simulated season 10. So I think that goes to show that, like, if she had not been eliminated, she would have made it very far into the competition.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think she was the total package, and it's a shame that she didn't manage to go further in that. Although I did see her sing the national anthem for a Los Angeles Kings playoff game a few years ago. So there you go. She did something. I don't think other than that, I mean, I mean, considering her talent, I think she should have been doing more stuff than that. Michael J. Clark, Michael from F in Boston, wants to know, why does Idol have a better track record of post-show successes than The Voice?
Well, I think it's just it's a general theory about focus. I think as much as people are excited by The Voice is all about the judges, to the point of where they've even gone out and said, like, we're not about creating an artist here. You know, I think the winner doesn't even get a recording contract. I think if they do, that it might be with like the judge signs them to a contract, but it's not like Idol where if you win, you're guaranteed a contract and a debut album. And so I think that, you know, The Voice also has more season performances, whereas American Idol is more focused around raw, undiscovered talent. And I think because Idol is so focused on the artists themselves and The Voice is more focused on let's just make an entertaining show, there's a discrepancy there, though neither one have really found great results from their winners recently.
Certainly recently. And I think that goes to the fact that if you just look at the ratings early on, they were just so insane for American Idol that's why you're seeing, you know, Carrie Underwood and Kelly Clarkson and all these people. They're getting all this exposure. Chris Daughtry, even when the viewers for your finales are in the 20s of millions of people. I think that, you know, that's a really great platform. Whereas now you're seeing there's so many, anybody can record anything, put it on YouTube and see what happens. So there's that. It's easier to get your stuff out there. It's harder to get noticed because there's so many things going on. And also, I mean, yeah, you look at The Voice, the ratings are great, but I mean, if we're looking at the finale viewers in millions here, so season 1 had 11, 2 had 11, 3 had 14, 15, 14, 11, 12, 11, 12. Those are their viewers in millions for their respective finales. That is like at the lower scale of what an American Idol finale would do. And so I think that also plays a part as well in terms of that. Yeah. That kind of has a role. But it's certainly what you brought up, the judges focus thing is a big thing as well. It's more so the show, not like, oh, let's focus on Kelly Clarkson or Carrie Underwood or whoever these other people are.
Yeah, and people are generally just getting tired of singing shows as well. As I talked about in the very beginning, Idol has spawned a lot of singing clones, and I think people are now just tired of it. I think now, at the end of the day, if you want to be successful, put out a good song. I mean, let's look at going to Canadian Idol. Carly Rae Jepsen finished in 3rd place, but nobody knew that until she only became famous because she put out Call Me Maybe. So I feel like it doesn't even matter what place you finish on this show. At this point, you're not going to get the exposure in in 2016. You have to put out a marketable song. That's what's going to get you the notoriety.
100%. And excellent point. Yeah, and there's a similar situation in Canadian Idol. There was a guy named Jacob Hoggard. He's in this band called Headley, which is very popular in Canada, but I don't think it is outside of Canada, really. But that's another example of a guy who didn't win. had a really few really good songs with his band, and then he was huge in Canada for a little bit. I don't really know if Headley's still coming up with new stuff. And Tyler Kakuno, local Canadian boy, he's saying Headley is great. So there you go. So
that's on my list with DJ Khaled.
Okay, DJ Khaled though, you check him out first because he's the man. He's great. Okay. All right. Final question for you, Mike. This is from Brendan Fitzpatrick. It's a very important question, and he asks, guys, who's better, Chris Daughtry or Chris Doherty?
Oh, that's tough. One has too much hair and one has no hair. I mean, I'm a big fan of Chris Doherty. Maybe I'm biased because I got to actually talk with him and interview him on Survivor Historians. I mean, you gotta go with the 1 win versus the 0 wins. I'm slated to go with Chris Doherty personally.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was gonna say Daughtry because although like Doherty did better on the show, I mean, like post show, I mean, if you look at what Daughtry has done, I mean, he's done so much stuff considering not winning. So give me Chris Daughtry. I'm biased because I love Chris Daughtry, and Chris Doherty is not one of my favorite winners ever, even though I really respect him and I think he was a great Survivor winner. But yeah, I'm sure if I talked to him, I probably would change my opinion on that as well. Okay.
I'm a little bit Daughtry. I'm a little bit Doherty.
Oh man, yeah, duet. That would be great if they were both to do that on one of the results shows this year. Oh, all right, and now here we are. It's Chris Daughtry and Chris Doherty from a CBS reality show, Survivor. I'm Ryan Seacrest. Seacrest out, and that was another thing.
Oh man, he hasn't said that in a while, has he?
No. Remember, that was a really common thing, and that's probably the last thing I want to talk about. Is just Seacrest tried like these little catchphrases and things throughout the show, but I think maybe it was like 4 or 5. He would always say, Seacrest out, and he would say that, and everyone just made so much fun of him for it, and then he just completely dropped it. So
or dim the lights.
Yes,
Let's do this.
Let's do this. Yeah, exactly. Soon people are going to be making fun of me for greetings, true believers, by making a Stan Lee reference at the start of every podcast for me, and then I'll drop it and I'll have to come up with some new intro. But yeah, maybe I'll start with I'll do Parhar out to end my podcast. What do you think? Do you think that could work?
I'd say try it out until it gets negative reception, because again, Seacrest hasn't done this for at least like 2 or 3 years, so it's time to bring it back. Retro is in nowadays.
All right. Okay. Mike Bloom, any final thoughts on American Idol before we wrap things up today?
The one hope that I do have for this season is, again, this is a season that, at least from viewing the first 4 hours, seems to be very focused on its past. I mean, they're bringing in several contestants to monitor the sort of pre-judges auditions that are going on, which they've been very candid about that they haven't beforehand. I hope they use a lot of opportunities to really acknowledge the franchise. I hope that they bring back the weekly mentors and that they bring back a different alum every week to really educate them about different styles. I think that would be a great way to really honor the franchise and send it off in style. Or they could they could just say, okay, we're going to do a regular old season of American Idol. This is the first time that we're really seeing a season have a final season and know it's a final season in the reality spectrum. So it'll be interesting to see whether they decide to make it just a regular old thing or to really go out with a bang.
Yeah, hopefully it's the latter, because I mean, American Idol has had such an impact on pop culture in North America, and really it shaped it was a huge impact on reality TV in general, these singing shows and everything. So without it, I think that we would look at things a lot differently. I don't think we would have shows like The Voice and X Factor and all these other things. So, and it's led to us getting a lot of discovering and finding out about a lot of great artists. So I think that's really great as well. Mike, thank you for being so generous with your time today. Really appreciate it. If you want to check out more stuff of Mike's, you can find him on the Top Chef podcast every week, reality TV RHAP-ups. Go to robhasawebsite.com/RHAP-ups to subscribe and make sure you don't miss an episode. You can follow Mike on Twitter as well. He's at a Mike Bloom type. You can follow me on Twitter too if you'd like. I'm at Jordan Parhar. So I tweet about each show during the week. I'll let you guys know what's coming up on the RHAPpy Hour. Whether we're talking about the Soul Patrol or we're talking about from Justin to Kelly, the movie cast, whatever it's going to be. Keep it locked to Twitter. I always keep you guys posted there with what's coming up next. Next week on the RHAPpy Hour, I don't know what I'm doing yet because it's the off season, and I think I did hog a lot of the bandwidth. So maybe we don't have an episode next week. I'm not sure, but stay tuned to Twitter. I'll let you guys know. Hopefully, we'll have something for you. I imagine I will be back with Taryn Armstrong. We'll be talking about something. Should be a lot of fun. So check that out. We'll be live on Blab. Check us out every Saturday, usually at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Hashtag for this episode, Mike. What do we want to go with?
I want to do hashtag Dunklecast because I'm still really behind this movement to get Brian Dunkleman onto this podcast with us. And I feel like maybe he has a Google alert out for Dunkle, period, in addition to Dunkleman. So hopefully we can really grab his attention.
Okay, so Dunklecast is what we want to go with?
Yeah, because that's the perspective. That's the goal that we want to reach for. So we're really putting it in our mind's eye here.
All right. So hashtag Dunklecast. Tweet Mike and I. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Use that hashtag and follow Brian Dunkleman, please. Like, we need to get this guy some more followers and get him some more respect. And like, come on, this guy is a historic reality television figure. I mean, this would be like if Rudy Bosch was on Twitter and he only had 3,000 followers. So go follow Brian Dunkleman. Great dude, and I'm sure. Or not, I don't know, but I just feel sorry for him. So please follow him.
Yeah, watch him be like a horrible person now.
Yeah, maybe he is. I don't know, but Mike and I will try and get him on the From Justin to Kelly podcast. That could be interesting. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, maybe not. Stay tuned. I'll let you know. For Mike Bloom, I'm Jordan Parhar. Hashtag Dunklecast. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Parhar out.